Hello and welcome to Cels episode 65. I am your host Alex Schmitz, and with me here today is Austin LaFonte.
This is my third time here.
Andrew Gleason.
This is my 100th time here.
Kenneth McNulty.
I finally get to talk about Ava.
And Chase Pritchard.
Oh, I'm here?
You are here.
Nice.
Yes, I believe this is Chase's second time ever on the podcast, the first being our Sword Art Online podcast.
I think it's either second or third, but yeah, I'm going to be safe and say second.
And Austin, you were on one of the early Kill la Kill podcasts, is that right?
Kill la Kill, Kill la Kill, and Nichijou.
Nichijou, that was it. Okay, now I remember.
I've been on
Nichijou's
every other one.
So,
Every other one has been him. All right.
I was one of the firsts.
And
It's true.
Kenny is Gen 1.
Yeah.
So
Kenny, can you move your
Gen
mic a
1.
little closer to you? All right, thank you.
Generation 1.
All right, so for those of you who hasn't been listening to us for a while, we are Cels. We are an anime podcast that is part of Tech Heads, which is part of AVW Productions and media production organization here at Ohio University. We here at Tech Heads do all sorts of cool stuff with video games, movies, music, anime, podcasts, all sorts of cool stuff. And we're here today to talk about a famous historic anime, Neon Genesis Evangelion. May also be talking a bit about End of Ava. We'll see how far we get into the discussion today. Before we do that, we're going to dive into the animation we've watched since last time. For myself, I've just been keeping up with the fall season of anime. Sadly, Rage of Bahamut had a recap episode this week, so that left me sorely disappointed. But Shirobako and Your Lie in April both came out today, and they were really good. I've been watching through some Black Lagoon. Tristan's been showing me some of Excel World, which is by the same author as Sword Art Online, which is interesting. So that's what I've been watching recently. Austin, how about you?
Neon Genesis Evangelion. I mean, I'm a very busy journalist person.
Journalist
anime for
person.
me.
Journalist.
kind of thick.
Very important.
All right, so no other anime. We'll let you slide on that one. Andrew, how about you?
Same thing. I started watching Ava on Monday, and I got done with it last night. So that was pretty much it. That's all I had time for. I didn't even play Dragon Age. I gave up Dragon Age for you, Alex. You should be proud.
I appreciate the sacrifice.
And I'm giving up Dragon Age right now to be here to talk about it.
Oh, come on.
Because Dragon Age. And
Dragon
I didn't
Age.
and then I haven't watched Korra yet, so that's the only other thing I watched. And I'm still waiting on my stupid roommates to finish Fate Zero so we can watch Fate Stay Night.
I saw something, apparently somebody tweeted something about like Korra fans are going to be upset with Friday's episode, so whatever's going on tomorrow
Wait, really?
should be interesting. Yeah.
Core fans?
Yep.
boy.
What about hardcore fans?
I don't know.
Avatar fans.
I don't know.
There's a difference?
Exactly.
All right, Kenny, how about you?
All the way back in a wee baby Kenny time. I was like, I think it was somewhere between middle
Baby
school and
Kenny
high
time.
school. Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon were like the anime.
We're talking about anime we've watched recently, not Ava yet.
Oh, dang it, I was totally not paying attention.
There.
Watched Korra. There you go.
We watched Cromartie High School recently.
Oh,
my
yeah,
God,
that's right. I
so
was
funny,
there.
yeah.
I did watch that.
Yes, that was great.
I watched it. That was fantastic.
Cromartie High School is great. See, the thing is,
Excella.
what I like
Best
about the
character.
show is you watch a couple like in a burst, it's great. If you keep watching prolonged, it kind of peters out. But if you watch it fast, I like it.
You like it.
You like it.
All right, and then Chase, what have you been watching?
All right, animation-wise or anime-wise?
Both, I guess.
Well, let's see. Well, the last anime thing I last saw was the 103rd episode of Sailor Moon. Basically, what happened was I just got bored one afternoon. I just figured, it's been a while since I've seen a Naoki-Hara-related thing. Maybe I'll see an episode he directed, and that episode's kind of interesting in that it's the first episode like Chibi Yusa was into Sailor Moon S, but the thing is, there's like these various mixtures of things. Like, part of it's horror, part of it's very comedic, part of it's very romantic, so there's like this whole mashup of
Those
things.
are
and
weird
it's very,
genres to mesh together.
It's Ikuhara. What'd you expect?
That's fair.
That's true. He is a little bit crazy.
Well, I would argue about crazy, but let's not get into that.
All right. So diving into the show that we're going to be talking about this week, as I said earlier, is Neon Genesis Evangelion, an anime that was released in 1995 from Studio Gainax, directed by famous director Hideaki Anno. We're sort of going to divide our discussion of the show into arcs. I thought to start with, we might as well talk about the first 6 episodes kind of as an arc, which is from the beginning through like the stuff with Rei. So thoughts on the first episode of the show, I suppose? It's obviously extremely iconic, you know. It's one, like, I suppose before we get into that, we should talk a bit about our exposure to Evangelion before we dive into
Yeah,
our
too
actual
excited
discussion
earlier.
of the show. I know. Got excited.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
For me personally, it's sort of weird for me where I have seen like clips of Ava over the course of the years. I actually read the entirety of the manga before watching the show. I like knew the story. I talked about it with Matt before, so I knew pretty much what the story of Ava was before watching the show and kind of had this view of it before I watched the show, and then finally watched the show, watch End of Eva to sort of finally experience this kind of anime legend. So on the one hand, I've just seen it recently, but on the other hand, I've kind of known what Eva is for a long time, so I'm kind of unique in that way. Austin, how about you?
I've pretty much known about Ava for a long time. It's been a while. I mean, started watching it, then I stopped, and then I heard you were doing a podcast, so I just finished it. But before that, I just saw like bits and parts of it beforehand, like you did. But what was weird is that, you know, the alternate universe thing at the very last episode?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen clips of that too without any context, so I didn't. So I was like, this is a dark and depressing anime you're talking about?
They tricked you. They tricked you.
Or did they?
Dun, dun, dun. Andrew, how about you?
So, like I said, I literally started watching it on Monday. But I have been like vaguely aware of its like general existence and some of the things that were going on. Like a lot of people talk about it with like Gurren Lagann. Obviously, like we talk of, there's a lot of like stuff going on there, and just my deep love for Gurren Lagann, and some of the influence that Ava clearly has on that. Pacific Rim. A lot of people talk about like how Pacific Rim is in many ways the spiritual successor-ish kind of thing to Ava. It's definitely tonally very different, but like the basic premise is very similar.
I mean, it's similar in that they're both mech shows. I don't see much beyond that.
Well, things being
well,
taken
like,
from
think-
beyond our
Well,
control to
the
fight us.
screenwriter admitted that he has seen Ava, but other than that, it could be arguable.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, like, we talked while watching Ava, we were like, oh, that thing was from Gurren Lagann, because, like, there was that part where they were like, well, let's cut funding to the robots so that even though they're clearly working and winning this fight against these things that attack one at a time to our coastal cities, like in Pacific Rim. So there was some comparison, but it's not like, I wouldn't say, like,
And
a
plus
true-
how the pilots are actually
Yes.
kind of famous.
The pilots are famous, kind of, sort of.
Less in MG than
Yeah.
in Pacific Rim.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that it's like a perfect comparison, but there are a lot of people that drew a lot of comparisons when Pacific Rim came out, and I was like
Calm down.
super into Pacific Rim. Well, I'm still into Pacific Rim because it's such a good movie.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
really good movie.
So that was another one, and then what was the other thing I was going to say about it? It's always been one of the things I've been wanting to watch. Oh, never mind, I just lost it. I don't know.
All right.
Anyway, so yeah, I literally started on Monday. So yay!
Yes, very fresh here. Kenny, how about you?
So like I said, way back in high school, middle school, before I really knew like anime and stuff, I watched, Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, that kind of stuff, which I didn't even consider anime. I'm like, Toonami's got cartoons. Are they anime? So yeah, my friend's like, now Kenny, if you're gonna get into anime, let me teach you. So he showed me Evangelion. He's like, here's Jesus. And showed it to me, and like
That's
we watched
actually
it
not
over the
even
course
that-
of like, I mean like 2 or 3 days, and I couldn't blink. Like the entire time, I like stayed at his house for like 2 days. I was like so tantalized by giant robots and depression that I've been obsessed ever since.
So
Like
tantalized
since that
by
day, it's still been like my
robots
favorite
and
anime.
depression.
Fair enough. And Chase.
Should I start with like the Cartoon Network days, or when I actually started watching it?
Oh, when you started watching it, I suppose.
All right. I would say probably started around 2009, 2010. I think I was in high school. Yeah. Basically, what happened was that at the time I was in I knew someone on Skype. He and I still talk to on Facebook. I don't want to say his name, so I'll just call him Jay, and I call him Jay anyways. And we got to discussion one day. I don't remember the context, and somehow you guys probably won't believe this, but he linked me the finale of End of Evangelion out of context. So that's because I liked him. I go, okay, I'll see this, and I'm like, interesting, very, very interesting. So I think I kind of spent like 2 or 3 days just thinking about it. Then I realized I should see more of this. So I kind of sat down, watched the rest of it, and then I realized, well, that was interesting. I should look into this more. So I did. I eventually joined a forum, which name I won't say for the time being right now, and here I am.
There you go. All right. So we have people of various backgrounds with Evangelion, which I think should make this an interesting discussion.
Austin! Hey, we literally just started like last week. So
Friends, we watched more.
yay!
I'm kind of somewhere in the middle there.
Damn.
All right. So, as I said, talking about the first episode of the show, pretty iconic. I do think, just curious, did everyone here watch through the English dub of the show?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think
No.
I've seen the entirety of the dub yet.
Really? And you saw it subbed, Austin?
Yeah, I saw it.
I watched it all.
From what I heard, it's like the sub sounds better with the robot sounds.
With the robot sounds?
That's what I heard.
I don't think they changed the sound effects in the dub. It's just more the voices.
Maybe
really.
it's Japanese sound effects.
Basically,
really,
I don't know. Yeah, Japanese
the
sound.
robot
Exactly.
voices did change. The sound effects, I don't think they changed.
Are they working? Interesting. Well, I will say, because overall I do think, especially given that it's the 90s, it's a pretty good dub. That first episode, though, I do think they're kind of getting into their roles a little bit, because it's a little rough.
I should probably mention that, as far as I'm aware of, that was ADV's second dub they did.
Wow, ever?
I think.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I thought by the end it was really good. Though. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like the performances,
saying-
especially the last
I mean,
couple episodes, were really, really
I'm just going
good.
to brag now. I got to go to a bunch of panels. I've gotten the English voice actress for Asuka. I've gotten her signature twice.
Ooh.
And I've gotten to meet her. And I got the guy from, Unit 4's pilot. I can't remember his name.
Toji?
Yeah, I got to say, Toji's like that's my favorite unit in the anime, so I got to get his autograph
even
too.
though it's only in like one episode.
But it's so cool
It
until
is
it
cool.
dies.
I got a story about the English voice actors, but I'll save that for another time.
All right, fair enough. Because one thing I will say, I didn't actually, once again, I knew about Evangelion. I knew about that first battle with the first angel.
That was cool.
I didn't actually know, though, that episode 2 cuts around the battle, where, like, he's getting the crap beat out of him. We cut to the next day, and, you know, he won the day. Everybody's normal. You know, it's only at the end of the episode that you see the Ava go berserk.
Which
And I think that's an interesting choice. I don't necessarily know if I agree with it, but it's an interesting choice. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I actually really like that part.
Me too.
I thought it was really effective to like just cut away from it
Oh,
and
yes.
then like
Yeah.
subverting expectations and whatnot.
It's really hard to pull that off, and usually it pisses me off when you go between like when it's almost like flashbacks. But they pulled it off really well.
Thinking about what I've kind of realized about the first 2 episodes, like, if we look at them together, I think what I've noticed is that there's kind of, like, this abstraction going on with, like, time and space going on. Like, remember how the first episode, like, begins with, like, all this text about what happened in the year 2015?
Right.
Like,
Second Impact.
Yeah, like, right off the bat,
what's
like,
going
Gainax is telling us that this takes place, or at least when it was released, in the distant future, so we're seeing all these events that we can't be involved with. So then when we go to episode 2, and when it flashes back to the past, then I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think the main thing is that one thing to notice about those 2 episodes is kind of notice like the abstraction of time going by as things go on, because I think that's kind of like one of the first impressions Anno wants to get across with.
That's interesting, because I do, on the one hand, I can see why they did it, because it does create an interesting sort of mystery, like Shinji's kind of curled up in a ball, like you don't really know like what happened to him during that battle. So sort of there's an interesting air of mystery around the episode. At the same time, when they cut away, like that was when the angel's like smashing his
and it splurts
arm
all
into
the
its
blood,
eye,
and that was awesome.
right? And
Those
so
are cool
it
shots.
cut off at a really intense moment. Like I was really invested in the battle, and then it's like it goes away. It's like, wait, where's my battle? Where's the battle?
See,
Yeah.
I get that. It was kind of anticlimactic, but I do kind of like that playing with like I think subverting of expectations and, like you said, playing with like the time difference in this whole thing.
Right off the bat, the show is already subverting things.
Yes, which is good to establish very early on in your deconstruction of your genre.
Deconstruction.
Well, that's what a lot of people call it, is like a deconstruction.
Yeah,
of the
it's
mecha genre, which I don't.
Bit more complicated.
I
than that.
agree. I don't know if that's exactly true, but like if that's what you're going for, then
guys,
that's the thing.
They're not even really mechs.
They're not.
Right?
That's true.
Well,
Let's get this out of the way right now.
I'm just gonna throw that out there. Yeah.
I mean, they're
Spoilers.
hybrid mechs would
They are.
probably be a better term for it.
Spoilers.
So- and it does create, like you said, that big mystery. Like, how did he do that? Like, and we're gonna get into this. And I spent a lot of this show. I don't know about you guys, like questioning as to the what. Like, does this version of humanity really deserve to live? Because
Well,
they're so
Freya.
incompetent sometimes.
well, the show kind of goes into it, but basically, the thing is that there's kind of like layers to like Tokyo 3 and what's that? Or Nerve, and there's kind of like this mixture of like complication going on that, like, again, the show kind of develops. But as you said, like, for now, it's supposed to be a mystery. Like, there's supposed to be something mystic about it.
There is, especially with all those religious references, which were, well, not subtle, but hey,
Not subtle in the
not.
least.
So, I mean, the
Not at all.
explosions
Nope.
all make crosses. Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
it's
That definitely. They're called angels. That happened. I was like,
Remember,
wow.
if it's there to be cool.
yes,
Yeah.
Actually,
Well-
I don't know if I should talk about End of Eva yet. Eva, yeah, but like they like quadrupled the number of crosses in that movie.
Well, yeah, I mean that one's full of all the Christian imagery. it should be noted that Anno and some of the production people from Guy Next have stated that they didn't really, because in Japan, Christianity is not a very popular religion, so they didn't really know what they were referencing exactly. They just looked up pictures and thought they looked cool.
Wait,
and
really?
sounded cool.
Really? 'Cause,
Yeah.
like,
No.
they had like
More
the
or less,
Magi,
yeah.
No, fun
the
fact.
Dead Sea Scrolls,
Yep.
the
I went
angels,
to,
the crosses.
a panel, and I actually asked them about them. Like, are the angels supposed to represent like the disciples? I asked them like some really weird questions because I was young, and they're like, not even a
17.
little bit.
Well, there's 17 of them.
I was asking if there's like
so-
some biblical reference. Like,
I
there's
mean,
not even
nope.
one
But
biblical
like the Dead
reference,
Sea
and I was
Scrolls,
like, oh.
they had actually had the Dead Sea Scrolls. They never really explained it in the shows, like how they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, but they had them.
they're
The
magic.
which are the details of like Revelations, and this was it. This was the end of the world. Like,
Right.
It's okay. It's okay. We're gonna make it. We're gonna
I know.
make this.
So anyway,
Gendo obviously came
back
up
to the
with that.
first episode, which is what we were talking about, is, well, my point about humanity maybe not deserving to survive is that they keep throwing Shinji, and then by extension his Eva, like they have the worst, like they keep just like, he literally just comes up and the angel is standing like right down the street from him,
Yeah,
and he's
charges
like,
him.
I don't even know how to pilot this thing yet.
Good luck,
and
kid.
It just smashes him, and I'm like, first off, we're gonna get this out of the way early. His dad is the biggest asshole, the worst father I have ever seen. I've watched a lot of bad,
Don't
like
censor that.
abusive
It's true.
fathers, like a lot of abusive fathers in my tenure of watching TV and movies and shit.
There's a reason that Get on the Robot meme's popular.
Yeah,
Yep.
he
Yeah.
is the worst.
Well,
He's
yeah.
just like, son, I hate you. Get in the robot and die, or don't die. And
How
then
it's
I'll
safe, man, and quit
like,
complaining.
like he literally treats his son like the most expendable soldier.
Right. Well, and
But he lives.
part of the point, as you learn later, of why he did that was because he wanted the Eva to go berserk. He wanted Yui to awaken
But there
within
has
the
got
Eva.
to
Just
be-
as planned.
Hey, that is not nearly enough of a justification for what he did to Shinji.
Oh no! I mean, he's a
But-
giant asshole.
Well, that's
No
why he
doubt.
gets random NPC number 5 to do it. It was like, son, do you want to die today?
Seriously. So we are going to talk, I mean, a lot about that, I assume. But so he just throws his son. Like, I don't even know. I started the first episode. I'm like, how did you expect him to win? Like, was there like an expectation for him to win this?
I'm going to stare at you until you do it.
That's
Seriously.
exactly what happened.
Seriously. Like, how was he expected to, like, I have no prior knowledge how to pilot this thing. Don't worry, we'll train you. Okay, no training was given. Literally shoved in front of Angel. Well, I got my ass kicked.
Look at it this way, though. At least he had the coolest knife. I love that
That's
about
true.
Avas. They have the coolest knife built
They do.
in. That
Why
is
did
so
they ever
cool.
invest in a sword, though?
Yeah, seriously.
Because, like, the knife was not nearly enough
Yeah,
half
they
the
need
time.
giant chain whip swords.
They
See,
do need
obviously
a giant
Pacific
chain
Rim
whip
was
Well,
sword.
what
trying to find-
what I understand is why they give them guns when clearly the knife always works and the guns never
Well,
do.
except when the knives don't work because they're too short range.
Well, yeah, but melee combat is pretty much always what wins.
That's what they said, actually. They said that melee combat is the most effective. I'm like, then why haven't you guys invested in building swords for these
Yeah,
things?
something better. Make a halberd.
Well, they have
Remember
they get
the
the Spear of
basics of
Destiny
They
at some
do
point.
get it. They do get the Spear of Destiny.
Remember the basics of CQC.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
Real quick, Chase, talking to your mic real quick for me.
All right, testing.
Yeah, it seems like his XLR might have just died on us.
No!
So
We need you!
we're going to take a short break to fix that, and we will come back to you guys in just a moment.
Dun-dun-dun-dun. Wait, let's play some music. Hey, boys and girls, you guys excited to watch Evangelion?
No!
Well, you know what'll make you excited?
Yay!
Gendo Ikari, because if he comes in, he'll make sure that you enjoy it no matter what.
Yay!
Gendo's rehabilitation course.
Yay!
All right, and we're back after that commercial break.
Thank God, our sponsors
And
are
Alex
really
fixed
Gendo
it.
friendly.
It's true, I fixed
Yes.
everything.
Congratulations!
Everybody, just a quick round of applause.
Congratulations.
I'm
Congratulations.
gonna make that joke
Thank
as
you.
many times as I can.
What about Alex?
Good.
No,
No, the congratulations joke. All right, so moving
Should
on.
have done that.
One more thing about the first episode.
Okay.
We spent the entire first episode like, well, why wouldn't you get in the giant robot? We want to get in a giant robot. That's all we want to do is pilot a giant robot. That launched a really long
10
conversation.
episodes
Well,
later.
no, we launched a really long conversation about, well, would you rather have sex ever again in your life, or giant robot?
That's an obvious
I'm like,
answer.
giant robot.
Giant robot.
Giant robots all the way.
I'm going for the former.
Depends on which giant robot. 'cause
No.
if it's an Ava, you wouldn't want an Ava.
That depends. What if it
We
has, like,
were
the
not
speed of
picky.
Bill Clinton?
We're not picky. So that was the thing. And then we were like, well, wait, can it fly in space? Well, then you have to go masturbation to fly in space. I'm like, wow.
no, that's
Wait.
tough.
Space.
How about this? How about this? What if it had the spirit of like Bill Gates in it? Or Jimi Hendrix.
Okay, that one.
Guys,
Jimi Hendrix.
I have something to say. Why not try both?
Dun, dun, dun.
Blasphemy!
Crazy sex and robots impossible.
You have to pick one or
hey,
the other.
chicks dig giant robots. And then
I
we start,
hate
then we
Megan
started
XLR.
talking-
You
Waka waka.
We really started.
All
talking
right.
about Megan XLR, and then the show got really depressing, and we're
We've
like, yeah, we had to
we've
stop
gone
making
to a
jokes.
deep hole.
Yeah.
Let's keep going.
All right.
We digress.
So, real quick, in episode 3, Toji and Kensuke are introduced, and I wanted to ask you about that, Kenny, because you said that Unit 4 is your favorite of the robots.
Yes.
Actually, it's Unit 3, actually.
Sorry,
So,
technically the fourth.
So, did you
three.
care about Toji at all, or was it just about the
Oh,
robot?
no, Toji could go die somewhere. I just care about the robot because it was like matte
You
black
actually-
and looked BA.
I actually really think he should have too.
and when they're testing it, I liked it the best.
I
It
like
died
Toji.
immediately. I was like,
I
neat.
like Toji too.
That's,
but-
I told my friend, I'm like, that's my favorite. He's like, that's a shame. And then the next episode, it exploded. I was like, no.
Gainax worked really hard on that one. He gave him an arm and a leg, or they gave him an arm and a
I
leg.
know, and then it just didn't matter.
Gainax has complicated feelings about giant robots, do they?
They hate him.
They do indeed.
Or do they?
I know. Toji and Kensuke are kind of interesting because they're one of the more humanizing elements of Shinji, since they're kind of his closest friends at school. But at the same time, they do come off as kind of annoying sometimes, especially Kensuke.
Yeah.
Well, because
I disagree.
That's all they want to. Because all they want to do is screw his pseudo mom
Misato.
which
forgot about that,
who's
yeah.
like super hot.
Hey,
so
she's
who's apparently the
Pen Pen.
hottest one.
And Pen Pen is the best thing
I
ever.
love
Oh,
Pen
yes.
Pen Pen's true.
Obviously.
Comment about Misato. Think of her as Sailor Moon in her late 20s.
See, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
why
ones.
they want to bang her. Like it makes
Spang?
sense.
I like Spang better.
I was going through screw and bang, and I just like they just merged.
Just right
They
there.
kept tied, and it was just the.
Hey.
All right.
Yeah.
And then episode 4 is the one with a very interesting name called the Hedgehog's Dilemma, which I will admit is one of, I do like
That's cool.
I
some of the
like- yeah,
elements
I
that
did like
episode gets into.
that was really cool.
Fun fact about this episode, Anno wasn't involved in this episode.
Right, I heard that this is the one episode he didn't write or co-write.
Right, exactly.
Which is interesting because it's one of the darker episodes of the early part of the show. you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
With Shinji running away. Interestingly, I read a thing actually that one of Anno had this project that he wanted to do before Eva that kind of didn't make it through the
yeah.
production process, and the big theme from that show was I mustn't run away or not to run
Oh,
away.
yeah. He did talk
yeah.
about that.
And so he kind of took that theme and brought it into Ava, and I think that's an episode where you see that.
He was set to direct that, if I recall correctly.
The other show.
The other I think it was supposed to be a movie, actually.
Interesting.
Like have you ever seen what's it called? Royal Space Force?
Oh yeah, Animes. I've seen
Basically,
that.
it was supposed to be a sequel to that, and they're actually still trying to work on that right now as we speak.
Yeah, I've heard about that. But the whole idea of the Hedgehog's Dilemma being that it's a actual thing that like hedgehogs and porcupines have to go with, where they want to huddle close for warmth like in the winter, but they can't get too close to each other because their spines
die.
will
Because
poke
they're
each
spiky.
other.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like a thing about humans want to get close to others, but they get hurt by them, so they stay away.
Which is
How
reinforces
metaphoric.
like for the end of the show, or what the overall theme of the show is, which I actually.
What?
It's really good that they're seeding that very early.
Getting to your friends and accidentally hurting them.
Yeah, well, no, really, just like being afraid to like let people in, but you're also too afraid to die alone, so you keep trying.
Yeah, they
and
really took care of that.
Also, we found like Kensuke is his name, right?
Kensuke, yeah.
Apparently, he has a depressing backstory that we don't know that much about.
Everyone
Oh
has a
right,
depressing
because he goes
backstory.
to his tent when he's running away from Nerve.
Yeah, that's
Knife.
true.
Knife.
Yeah, they can't, I mean, we just called him Michael Bay at one point because we were just making jokes, but like, because he was filming every. It was the scene when they were
That's
on
right, I
the
forgot about
when they
this.
were on the UN like boat,
Oh,
like
yeah,
later on.
boats. We were like, yeah, he really is just Michael Bay because he's just got this. He's
He's
just
a
filming.
he's
Now
a
we have to
reflection.
go underwater.
He's a reflection of the otaku mindset himself.
Yeah,
Apparently.
He is us.
Oh, I hope not. I hate his voice.
well,
But
that's just. Like,
He's actually tolerable in the sub version.
well,
Yeah,
maybe
he
in the
is.
dub, his voice is pretty.
Yeah, it-
Yeah,
yeah,
I
his
like
voice was pretty
watched
great.
the English version of like the alternate reality thing because that's the only part of the dub thing I watched. And the one sentence he speaks is like, "Dear God."
That's fair.
See, you witnessed it.
Yeah, I would say that he's probably the worst of the main characters. Like, in terms of-
He's not a main character. He's a side character.
well, like
Yeah.
of the like
The main side
recurring
characters.
characters. Like, I like all the main characters, like main act.
Yeah, you're not really supposed to take the psych. Well, not necessarily take them seriously, as in like, say, episode by episode, you learn more and more about them. But they're
Well,
kind of like important to whatever theme the episode talks about. Because I'll go ahead and spoil this. They basically get a "all right, bye bye" in like episode 24.
That I mean,
There's no bye sequence. They did storyboard goodbye scene for Toji at end of Evangelion, but we'll get to that.
Well, yeah, because
Interesting.
I do want to talk about that, especially when we get to
The later part of the show.
the later part of the show. Around, I think it's 18 is where Kenny's favorite robot shows up. And
Oh, yeah.
I have some opinions, and I was hoping that you guys could clarify some things about that. But we'll
Ooh, sure.
talk about that.
All right.
I'm up for it.
All right, well, fine. We'll talk about it now. We don't have to necessarily go totally in
Oh, okay,
order.
cool.
So you're talking about the part where his robot gets possessed by the angel and
Yes.
Shinji has to destroy it.
Yeah, and when Shinji has to destroy. So first off, we were like super on board with this because they had yet to tell him, and that he was like, we're like, he's gonna kill his best friend. We're like, that's good. Like that's just like a really good plot twist. Like that's something really good. And then his dad makes him do it. And at first, my roommate Pete, who was watching this, he's like, I think that takes away from it. But then as he's slowly just beating the robot to death.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, he's like, no, it got worse, and he's
it
just
got worse.
and Shinji's just in the cockpit, like screaming, "No, I don't want to do it. Make it stop!"
Wait, where
And
was he?
He was Shinji was the dad. Shinji's
No, like,
dad.
what location of the robot? Where is he?
The robot was just beating the
Dummy
piss out of him.
plug.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the dummy plug system. I do agree with you. Actually, I do really like the Toji arc of the show.
Yes,
you know,
I
it's
really
like
like the
this
Toji
whole
arc
mystery
too, yeah.
about the fourth child and all that. I do agree that honestly, the fact that Toji doesn't die from that, I think,
Yes.
takes away from that.
Which is what I wanted
It's
to ask
impressive.
about, because we thought he looked pretty dead, and we were like, "Oh God, is he gonna die?" And then he doesn't die, and we're like, "Okay, I do think that does kind of take away from it." And then we were wondering because then he never does anything in the show ever.
Well, like I said, they did plan to go into this in Evangelion. And basically what happened was, what really happened was that Toji's, like, one of his legs is in a cast now, and he's in a wheelchair now, and
But they never really do anything.
I think he was doing something basketball related, and they were talking about something I can't recall, but
I do remember
basically,
those scenes of him.
in fact,
shooting.
really, the odd thing is that as you guys talk about this, I can't help but remember, like, this one part in The Fox and the Hound with, like, one of the main characters, quote-unquote, dying, and then, like, it turns out that he actually did, and it's just one of his legs gets broken, so... Well, folks, there's an interesting parallel for you.
yeah.
like-
Well, what's funny about that actually is I was looking at something online and it was like, yeah, Toji lost a limb from that. I was like, what? You know, and then
Yeah, you did,
apparently in that
Yeah.
scene, you see him in the hospital bed and there's like a there's no the blankets are like low at a part of his leg. Like if you look closely, you know, so basically like he lost.
I like
he
that.
lost
That's
a
kind of
leg.
subtle.
But
Yeah.
but at the same time, it was so subtle I didn't even notice it.
Plus, he
Yeah, I
also
appreciate
says
that.
like, "Tell my sister I'm completely fine."
I like
Like
that
him-
too.
Right.
But my question was there like because it felt like there was originally a plan where they were going to kill him,
As far-
and then like maybe the
Oh, wait.
producer. I was wondering if there's like any story behind that.
Let's
Like
see.
did the producers say we can't kill a child off on our show?
As far as I'm aware of, well, I'm sure you know about the whole like proposal was like completely different or something. Do you know about that?
No, not really. No, I'm not
Well,
super
basically the
versed in
proposal was
history here.
kind of like a bit different, but as far as I'm aware of, it wasn't necessarily planned, but at the same time, it's kind of complicated. Basically, I think the answer that I could give to you right now is that there's a way the show kind of like formed as it like kept going. Like basically to summarize, basically Anno was just making it up as he went along.
I mean, you can kind of see that a little bit.
But as far as I'm aware, no, he did not plan it like initially. So if I had to make a rough guess, no, he didn't. It just happens that at that part of the story, it was probably better if he didn't die.
so was he like? Because if he was writing it as he went, he was like, I'm going to save him, keep him alive so that I can use him later, and then he just kind of never did because he was focused on working on the other
Again,
stuff.
because of like the way the production worked, I'm going to make a guess that they probably thought about it and they probably discussed it, but due to kind of like what they were focusing on at the time and what they wanted to get away from the show, they probably thought, okay, we better not go in this direction. We'll probably get to them later.
What's interesting is that actually in the manga, which I have read, which is created and illustrated by basically the co-creator of Evangelion,
character designer.
right? But I was actually listening to this A&N podcast that Matt pointed me towards, and they were talking about how he was actually very involved with the story making process of like what those characters would be and sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So he's actually pretty important. Basically, in the manga version, Toji does die. And I actually do kind of like that more.
actually-
I think that would be more effective.
Actually,
too.
he actually did like the I think his last name is Samato, I believe it is. He actually did discuss that, and basically, from what I can recall, his summarization is basically the manga is my interpretation of Anno's story, and the anime is how Anno sees his story. So basically, in terms of like the manga and the anime, it would be wise for like fans everywhere to like treat them as like separate alternative universes or something.
Right.
Yeah, that seems best.
And to go into the production aspect of the show, because that is something pretty interesting and that is very apparent in the narrative of the story. By episode 13 of the series began to deviate significantly from the original story, and the initial script was abandoned. The number of angels was reduced to 17 instead of the original 28, and the writers changed the story's ending, which had originally described the failure of the Human Instrumentality Project after an angel attack from the moon. Starting with episode 16, the show changed drastically, focusing on the characters and discarding the grand narrative concerning salvation for a narrative focusing on the individual characters. This change coincided with Anno's development of an interest in psychology after a friend lent him a book on mental illness. This focus culminated in a psychoanalysis of the characters in the final 2 episodes.
That sounds like Evangelion.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds like
there's more to that story, but that's basically the gist of what happened.
Yeah, so basically, midway through, they were writing the story as they went, and Anno basically cast out what script they had for like the last few episodes of the show and totally replaced it with something else.
No, it was really towards the last 2, but that's a story of itself.
See, but I was hearing a story about how I believe it was like one of the animation directors on the show didn't talk to Anno for like years after between
that's true. That's
between
true.
the TV show and end of Evangelion because
Right.
Anno kept changing the script so much
that
they had ideas for what they wanted to do with the characters, and then it just totally got flipped on because he changed the script.
I should probably mention that for Evangelion, do you know about how the writing process worked?
I know that it was the Guy Next is a very collaborative studio, and that Anno wrote it as he went.
Well, there was also something going on. Is that there was you notice that like in the credits, there's usually like 2 people credited.
You guys having fun over there?
One person, one person is there, and then Anno is the second name.
Okay.
Basically, that first name would write the initial script of that particular episode. Then, once that's written, Anno will take that script and basically rewrite it. But basically, the basic elements of the script would probably still be there, but most likely the final episode you see is basically 60 to 80% Anno.
Interesting.
So Anno just takes direct control.
Apparently.
Yeah.
So, finishing up this first arc of the show, I just wanted to say that I really do love the angel that Rei and Shinji fight in episodes 5 and 6, the Diamond Angel.
Oh, I love that.
Diamond
Yeah,
Angel's
yeah,
the
yeah,
best.
So
episode 6 was great.
Correct me. That's the one that cries and like makes or not cries, makes the tears that like acid down into nerve.
No, that's it's the diamond that shoots the laser
D8.
beam.
Okay, sorry. I have to remember. There's so many that I have to remember. Sorry.
all right,
Yeah.
because that's the one with the sniper rifle, and I love that.
Yeah.
That was
That's
awesome.
right.
The sniper
See,
rifle and the shield.
you'll appreciate when you watch the Rebuild 1.0
Yeah.
because that makes that scene, that whole sequence, like way more
So
epic.
much more
But that's
Yeah.
hard. Well,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
they shot the lasers and they like diverged and exploded. I'm like, that was.
I'm really excited for Rebuild now because Gabriel's my favorite angel.
Okay.
That's true.
Mhm.
Also, is that the one where? Because this is the one where I started questioning like how competent Nerve was. Is that the one where like he literally just like gets out of like the gates, like they literally rise him up, and he just looks up and the laser hits him in the face?
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
And
yeah.
I'm like, guys, I cannot begin to understand how incompetent you guys are right now.
That's that.
Well, I guess you could make the argument that the angels they had fought up to that point were more melee-focused ones.
But he literally had no time to react.
Well, yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't his fault.
That one,
Certainly.
a lot of the things in this show that he gets blamed for are not his fault.
I suppose so. So then, the second arc of the show is episodes 7 through 13, which I sort of
Right.
call the silly episodes of the show, where it's really very different tonally from the rest of it.
It is,
It
but
is.
The beach episodes
there's
of the
still that's debatable.
I mean, it's not silly as in like totally lighthearted, but for example, when you compare, episodes 25, 26 to Asuka and Shinji doing a dance-off, to synchronize their
Well,
movements so they can beat the angels.
That fight scene was awesome.
It was an awesome.
No, it's
It was.
impressive how
Yeah,
coordinated
that
it was.
great.
And it made them like each other. It's character building.
It
Right.
was all those things. I'm just saying it's a lot more lighthearted there
Well,
than it is
this-
later,
it's
to the point that it almost
that's-
feels like a
that's
totally
the
different show.
See, this is the one where I think that they were like, because they were trying to cultivate their characters in a more, in a
Yes.
less heavy way than
Exactly,
like the
yeah.
rest of the show.
It was definitely one of those lighthearted segments in the show, which I was impressed because it already showed that it had a lot of like depressing
'cause
elements.
he
You could
already went
say
through
when
the
that
PTSD
episode
arc.
came out of nowhere, I was like, huh, that's nice.
Well,
and then,
there is like interesting things going on. Like episode 7, we get to learn a bit more about Misato and how like her perspective of the world's like. Episode 8, we meet Asuka for the first time, and we get to
I love Oscar.
initially learn. We'll get to that. Initially, get to know her. Episode 9, we get to develop the characters' relationship between one another. Episode 10, we dive a little bit more into Asuka, etc.
They all. I'm not saying that they don't do character development and they don't move the story along. I think that's where Kaji comes into the story and gives Gendo Adam, which is a really important plot point. So there's stuff going on there, and honestly, I do kind of enjoy that part of the story because I think that might be closer to what Evangelion was perhaps in the original script. Like it was gonna be more like. Because in that bit I was just talking about, there were more angels that were supposed to happen. It was supposed to be more action-based, and then they changed it to more psychoanalytical.
Hey, Alex, sorry to interrupt, but I should probably mention this before we keep going. If you keep talking about that initial script, you're thinking of the proposal. And with the proposal, Anno wasn't, really thinking, the show, further ahead. He was just thinking it as, as a general, thing going on. So when you refer to it as that, don't view that proposal as the final treatment. That was just something they were thinking about during the time that was written. It wasn't a finalized proposal or anything. That was just something to sell the TV advertisers or something.
I can understand that, but it is true that because they had serious budget issues in the later part of the show, they kind of switched it from a more from a more action-based show to a more psychoanalytical one.
One of the persons in Gainax would argue about that, saying it wasn't really budget, but more like time. But I think I better save that for when we get to the later half.
Yeah,
I mean, there's very obvious parts near the last episodes where they seriously ran out of budget.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's a reason for it. I mean,
that's the whole deal. They say the last episode's like it was the original.
When we do talk about that part, I do have something because I do think that sometimes they really use it to a really good advantage.
The last 2 episodes.
The last 2 episodes, really good advantage. There's that scene in the elevator where we were where it just goes on. It's a whole minute of just nothing. And I actually really like that because I thought that was really effective, showing how awkward it actually is. Because then you feel that level.
What I liked even more was when Shinji was holding Karu just ready to kill him. That was one of the best scenes I've ever seen.
I thought that stayed just a little too long, but I think that was mostly because of the score. I think once the music swelled, we should have killed him.
Guys, we should probably save that for when we get
we keep getting back. Okay, so Asuka. I guess we should talk about Asuka.
Well,
that's when they introduced
I just wanted to mention one thing real quick while we're on the subject because I found this interview with one of the employees of Gainax that was talking about basically why the show went into the more psychoanalytical direction. What he said was, I didn't mind it. The schedule was an utter disaster and the number of cells plummeted, so there were some places where unfortunately the quality suffered. However, the tension of the staff as we all became more desperate and frenzied certainly showed in the film. About the time that the production system was completely falling apart, there was some opinions to the effect of, if we can't do satisfactory work, then what's the point of continuing? Wow. However, I didn't feel that way. My opinion was, why don't we show them the entire process, including our breakdown? Wow. So basically, this guy was saying that the production process was falling apart.
Alex, do you know who said that? The director of FLCL.
Really?
Really?
That's interesting.
He was the co-director of Eva.
I didn't know that. So basically, point being, the production process was falling apart, but this guy kind of thought, well, we're in this desperate situation. Anno is going through a serious depression. Why don't we channel that into our creative property?
Yes. Thank you for doing your homework.
Yes, I came.
Yeah, he does
I don't have a 104-page paper, but I did come prepared.
He does this every time, and
he does. I've seen him type his notes while we were watching anime together. I make fun of him all the time for it.
Wow.
You see him during Code Geass.
But yes, episode 8, the episode that introduces Asuka, I will say that is definitely one of my favorite fights of the whole show on the battleships.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
great.
I liked it. The next fight, though, the one where they're dancing, I think is a lot better.
I see.
Yeah, that's probably
it's part of the issue. I think one of the issues with Ava as far as the budget is concerned is that Gainax was literally kind of falling apart, as they were making the show. But number 2, I do feel like there was some maybe budget management issues in that they spent so much in the early part of the show, and it looks great. Like the Asuka fight, the fights with Ava Unit 1 look amazing even to this day, really. But because that they spent so much of their budget up front that they kind of ran out later.
They didn't really discuss that too much in the interviews that I've read. The implication that I seem to get is that, well, Alex, probably one thing I should mention about Gainax is that Evangelion is not what's the word I'm looking for here? it's special in some ways, but special in not, because like this isn't a problem with like Ava. It's a problem with like previous Gainax works, like Gunbuster and Nadia, especially Nadia, The Secret of the Blue Water. That one went through budget problems. Like, no, not necessarily budget problems, but it did went through problems. So yeah, and there was like money issues, because like one of the persons in Gainax, like 2 years or so later, did get arrested for tax reasons.
Evasion.
Tax evasion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with that. Gainax has a history with that. I know there was something similar with Gurren Lagann, that they're like, in that case, I think they saved a lot of their budget for the last 2 episodes to make those like really amazing. There's the term Gainax ending. Like, Gainax has been known as the studio that's not always the most controlled with those sorts of things. So you're correct. It's not just something with Ava. I'm just saying that it's something that probably happened. And we've heard talk to.
It should be something that should be speculated on, but it's not something that's been absolutely confirmed just yet.
Right. Well, I mean, we know that they were running out of a budget as the show went on. We know that for a fact.
Out of time, out of budget.
I suppose we don't know specifically. Did they purposefully spend so much budget in those early episodes that it affected later on? That's more me speculating.
I have my doubts, but we should probably wait till we get to the actual second half before we go there.
So yeah, kind of the transition to the second half is episode 14, which is this half a recap episode, and then we come into this bit of Rei monologuing for a bit.
Yeah, she gets all dark and poetry-y.
Yeah, I think
it gets middle school-esque.
It does.
That was all written by Anno, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, I liked it, especially because we hadn't gotten a lot of her character by that.
I didn't like the recap because episodes.
I didn't like the recap. Well, we started to skip that episode.
At least it was half an episode.
And then my friend looked it up. He's like, "No, the other half's a Rei episode." We're like, "Oh, nope, we're going back now," because we are very curious about what's up with that.
Thematically, it's a very important episode, because I don't know if I talked about this, but it's kind of the episode that kind of. Well, in retrospect, it kind of alerts the viewers, or at least the audience, on where the show is going from that point onward.
Transition to from the recapping of what's happened so far. Then we're like, okay, so now this is where we're going with this.
The first half relates to the first 13. The second half warns you what the next 13 would be like.
Which is actually kind of cool. And very...
not only do they do it with the whole poetry thing, but they do it really well with the visuals, too.
They do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of the visuals during those kind of sequences are really well done.
Music was amazing too.
It was.
Oh yeah, I will say that for sure. I do like the music. It's a guy named Shiro Sagisu, something like that. He actually also did the score in Magi, which is a show I like quite a bit.
I remember that show.
Right.
I will say episode 14 does use some. There's a whole scene that's basically reused animation. Remember when Unit Zero freaks out, and starts pounding its head against the wall?
Yeah,
it's exactly the same animation as was used when it freaked out with Rei originally, and Gendo burned his hands, getting her out.
That part was we did notice that, but we're like, oh well.
Just reusing it
you do see a lot of the animation shortcuts, and I just don't know if that's like, because I'm not as big an anime nerd as I possibly is. Is that like a product of like the time period, or is that like?
No, actually, it's basically a TV animation thing. Like ever since like the '60s with like Hanna-Barbera, there was always budget issues with like doing animation for TV. It's always been an issue.
It's funny about that because like we watch a lot of modern anime, and it's
spoiled.
It's a little less evident nowadays.
It's true that older anime definitely had more animation issues. I think Evangelion in particular though does show a lot of both reused animation and then stuff where they would like there's a lot of shots where they do these silhouette things where a bright light is shining behind people and they're just black silhouettes, so you don't see the lip flaps, so it's basically you're just staring at a still image of them talking for 30 seconds.
But I also like as an artistic choice too. I think that's very effective.
That's Anno's way to get around those limitations.
Right. It's animation shortcuts.
It's like having a council.
I actually really like. I think the show does a lot of really good job of like using their animation shortcuts effectively.
Yeah,
I agree.
In certain cases, yes. In other cases, no.
I agree that
but,
that's
exactly
cases.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But
totally agree.
That is one interesting thing you see show up throughout the show.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, Rei, poetry, dark,
indeed,
brooding, but also pretty well written.
Yeah.
It was definitely a step above like your high school emo.
Yeah, even the dub.
She's a whole new level.
Even the dub version of it's actually pretty good too.
Yeah, I actually really like her voice actress.
Yeah, it's so quiet. You kind of have to strain to hear her.
You do,
but I think that's part of the point.
Yeah, that's kind of important.
I've seen her in real life too. She's a nice lady.
Oh, is she?
She's a nice lady.
Yeah.
But we did kind of gloss over. Asuka. I like Asuka a lot.
You do? Okay, well,
Which is I know. I think that's kind of a weird opinion. I don't know how you guys felt about Asuka because I know my
now
roommates
that we're
were
She's a
complaining.
hardcore gal.
now that we're in this,
Oh boy, we're going there.
now that we're in the second half of the show, why don't we just, instead of maybe doing like the episode by episode talk, we can just talk more generally about the characters and what we
Well, because that's
think
really
about
what
what
the
happens
show
to them.
becomes about the characters.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right.
And the plot does seem to start to take a back seat here, even though they do keep trying to develop it. Because there's
right.
that episode where they show like the beginnings of Nerve.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
flashback
that's
episode.
cool.
Yeah, that's actually I like that episode.
I like
like-
that episode, but
yeah.
I feel like it could have told me more.
Well, honestly, one of
I
my
still don't know what the second impact.
my
really
favorite
was.
episodes of the show, or
Same
favorite
impact, man.
favorite elements of the show, I should say, is the mystery element of it. You know, what is human instrumentality? What is Sele? What's Adam? What's Lilith? What's
some
the
of those
secrets
things,
of the second
some
impact?
of those things I can actually explain, but
Well-
or I have theories at least. So
Well,
I don't know.
and they do explain certain
theories.
things, especially when you
Yeah.
get to End of Ava, but that's a whole other
and then,
discussion.
there's my like the religious symbolism that like I can pull
Yeah,
from.
don't think too much about the religious stuff.
But like they brought like Lilith is like a pretty obscure like
Biblical
reference
figure, so.
in like it's a very obscure biblical
I mean,
figure.
they obviously
so
did some things intentionally, but most of it not really. Because that name is very, like, with that character especially, it's a good choice, and it's, like, well placed, and you're right. Like, that's
Yeah.
something they had to at least have thought of for Lilith
they,
specifically.
they had to have like
and obviously
at least
Adam's pretty easy, but
understand when Adam when he calls Adam the Adam being Lilith. Instead, I'm like, oh, see that changes a lot of things actually
Connotations.
about like
Yeah.
what's going on. So they did obviously do some research
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yes.
not
just
as
a
much
Google image
as
search.
Just a tiny bit.
maybe not as much as like
I do have one question
think
that
they did?
Yeah.
Chase or one of you guys might be able to answer. Why is it that they call Lilith Adam for the longest time in the show? Because they're wrong about that for
Yeah.
a large portion of it. Kaji calls Lilith Adam.
As I recall, that was intentional.
So what? That Kaji was fed misinformation?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Interesting, because like even Kaoru when he comes down thinks he's going down there to
Right.
see Adam, and then is
he's-
surprised
and then
when
he
it's
turns
Lilith.
and sees
Yeah.
Lilith, and that was like a big
And
plot
hey,
twist to
it
me.
goes back to the mystery thing you talked about.
Although at the same time, I'm pretty sure Gendo called. He gets the little parasite in the box that he gets from Kaji, and he calls that Adam. So I
Yeah.
don't really know what's going on there.
I thought the parasite in the box was actually Adam.
Well, that is
Adam.
actually
Okay.
Adam. They call Lilith the thing on the cross, the white, creepy,
Not Jesus.
bulby thing,
Not Jesus.
Adam for the longest time when it's actually Lilith, as you learn near the end
They're
of the
not
show.
Jesus,
Maybe
but
she's
they pull the
individualistic. That's
literal spear of destiny out of
Indeed.
and
Yeah.
throw it at a thing, which
But-
was badass.
But talking about Asuka, she's interesting because on the one hand, I want to like her
I
because
like her.
she is like more energetic,
of people like
and
her.
on the outside at least, seems to be more happy than like Rei or Shinji. And then you learn later that she has tons of
crippling
She
depression.
has
And
she
she
like
is
everybody else in the show has
complicated.
crippling
Yeah,
depression.
she goes
but
into comatose state from her depression. So.
Yeah.
Basically, different states.
Yeah, but my problem with her is that she is so bitchy throughout the entire show.
See,
That's intentional. That's all.
That is
That's all I'm
intentional.
saying.
She's spunky.
I can appreciate that it's intentional. I'm just saying I didn't like her because of that. She
See,
was always mean to Shinji.
and my
almost
roommates
always.
and my roommates also really didn't like her, but I actually really liked her because I think that she injected a lot of like life into the show that I think that it kind of needed for.
And there's a moment, episode 22, that always stuck out to me. Like, you guys remember that scene where like Asuka talks to her like mom in German, I believe.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
she kind of talks to her in German. They talk about it. Then they hang up, and then Asuka kind of looks.
Oh,
does,
yeah.
does the dramatic face thing,
One of my favorite lines in the whole show is actually in that scene.
and then like Shinji kind of talks about, oh, it must be nice to talk to your mother. Then Asuka goes into like this
Yes.
monologue, and why don't you describe it? You seemed
No,
excited.
like that was actually one of my favorite scenes in the whole show because she talks to her mom in German, and I'm taking German, so I understood a little bit of what they were saying.
Did she say
And my roommates turned to me like, so what'd she say? I'm like, oh, mostly just like, oh yeah, I'm really popular. Yeah, I'm doing well. Like it's one of those like, yeah, I'm totally fine. Don't worry about me.
Superficial.
kind of
Yeah.
conversations. Like a very like
Yeah,
kind of
then
very
Asuka is completely serious to Shinji and kind of talks about how she sees like the relationship between her mother. He's kind of honest, and then out of nowhere she just goes, "Wait a minute, why am I telling you all this?"
Yeah.
Ah!
Well, see, but like that's the thing though, because she turns and he's like, "Oh, so did you talk to your mom?" "Yeah, I did." I'm sure it would be nice to talk to one of my parents.
Yeah, I mean,
and
it's-
that was like one of the darkest things I've
Yeah, I
ever
mean-
heard him say so casually. I'm like, oh my god, Shinji.
I mean that pretty much that whole scene is just like something, almost kind of like something out of real life. It's like you kind of like get this persona that like, and that's a kind of like a big thing that Anno like gets really into, like especially like in his later stuff, like at post Ava, like he gets really into like the image of like what this person is versus the reality of what that person actually is. And basically Ava is kind of like, not necessarily the first show where he explores that, but it's kind of one in which he kind of explores those themes very, very seriously. And that scene is kind of like almost like a good example.
Yeah, because she kind of lets her mask down, the very bitchy, very confident mask that she built around herself down for just a minute for Shinji. And I think that's a very telling scene for her character. And I always liked her because I do think she's the energy that the show needed. And also, I like a lot of the funny things that she says. And then she does become a very complex and interesting character as it goes on.
And then the rest of the episode happened.
Kenny, what are your thoughts on Asuka?
I just like she kicks Shinji in the balls when he needs to get kicked.
That's true.
That's what I like about her.
Although,
what about you, Austin?
I really agree with the whole she brings life into the thing, because you can tell, like, when she starts getting to that depression, she starts getting comatose, that like, even her, she just, that's a really significant turn.
It is.
Like, just her, even though it was the entire show was going that way, just her going through that made it turn a lot more.
I mean, I could be remembering this incorrectly because I haven't seen the show in quite a long time. But I remember, like, at least apart from me, like, the show has always, had the darker tone. I understood that from the beginning. My friend warned me, he's like, "You're gonna be really sad." I was like, "Cool." So watching it though, like after like episode 22 especially, because it's getting close to the end, when she starts taking the more depressed turn, that's when the show just got really dark after she got sad. Because like I almost like saying, like you said, like the life. Shut up, phone. Like the life, it was almost sapped out, so everybody else was just really sad.
Yeah,
too,
that was
everyone
like,
else was in
because
the
then
funk.
when she gets depressed, with the rest of the show getting depressed, that really does take the actual
the rest
life
of it
of
away.
The final scene of that episode is just like, "So, Asuka, how you doing?" And then Asuka goes into that speech. Then the episode ends. Like it's almost like a very interesting like comparison between the scene we just talked about to the final scene. Like, that's something to think about.
There is actually. I really want to watch the show again because I would like to like really look for. Because one of the things I did notice, like looking back on the show, is she does spend like literally the entire show blaming Shinji for things, even when they are clearly not his fault. And I was wondering if that's like supposed to be a metaphor for, because one of the big things at the end of the show is that a big part of your perception of yourself and what you and how you perceive yourself is how other people perceive you. And since she's always blaming him for everything, he's perceiving her as always blaming him for stuff, and that's to reinforce his depression that he's going through.
And anything, also kind of not necessarily has feelings towards Shinji, but he does have like sympathies towards him at least. Like remember, like that one moment, episode 10, where like Shinji actually does rescue Asuka, and then like we cut to Asuka, and then she smiles and then goes, "You idiot." Like
Baka.
That pretty much gives you that idea on how like the relationship between like Asuka and Shinji kind of
I really did like their relationship together.
There you go.
I did think that like I did kind of like ship them a little bit, because I do think that their relationship is like something that work, even though the show doesn't feel like exploring that as much, which is fine. But I do think that that's like part of it, is that Shinji's like, because it's all, since he's the main character, his perception of her is that she's always blaming him, and that's to reinforce his own depression through his perception of this reality.
Yeah, good observation there.
Yeah, well, the thing I think that's interesting about Asuka is that she shows, like you said, she shows glimmers of like where she
I have nothing. I forgot it.
where she is nice, and she shows like, her true self, to him in moments, but then so much of the time is just so always yelling at him. And I agree, she does bring up the energy of the show a lot of ways, like how she quotes German on occasions. It's kind of a more fun character.
Like, German words when she's mad.
Right, she's a more fun character than Shinji or Rei. And I actually think that of all the characters, her descent, later on in the show is actually what I would have liked. It is sad, and it's more of what I will like to see, because he tells her descent through her actions, through the character. Like how her whole like identity is based on being the Ava pilot, and so when her sync ratio starts dropping, she just starts totally breaking down pretty much, so she had this like false confidence in front of her all the time, when she starts losing the one thing that she thinks validates herself being a good Ava pilot, then she completely breaks down.
Which also, that does make her like an interesting parallel to Shinji, because she wants to be the good pilot, and Shinji is only nice. People are only nice to him when he is the good pilot, because he is the best pilot.
Asuka's the extrovert, Shinji's the introvert.
Yes.
Right.
And
See, you know what I realized? I know what the show's missing. It could have ended on a happy note. Everyone would have lived if they had a Kamina. When they're all sad,
that
just
is
punching them in the
actually
face.
true.
It's interesting
You're not wrong, Kenny.
because
actually.
Shinji and Simone can be compared in
They
a lot
could.
of
Well,
ways.
that's what I was saying. Yeah, that's what I was
yeah.
saying.
Just Shinji doesn't have like.
Just ends with the giant robots clapping to one another, just going, "Congratulations."
Congratulations.
Okay, well, in his defense, Shinji never gets shirtless and gets really man-hunk, though.
That's true. Well, I mean, it's interesting.
Why would Shinji be shirtless?
Because Simone
Well,
was
because
shirtless
Simone
later
like,
on.
doesn't wear a shirt for like the back half of Gurren Lagann.
He doesn't
so.
need one.
He is transcendent shirt.
In space, you don't need shirts.
In space, no one can hear you scream or have shirts.
Or or need them.
Or be
All right.
super ripped.
So let's talk a little bit about Rei then, our other main female character.
Okay.
Yes.
Rain
She
the
is,
Sengai.
like,
Yes,
no
the reason Moe
personality.
exists.
Well, I would say the way Moe exists, but the reason Kudereis exists, which is the term, like Tsundere is Asuka, Kudere is like
Right.
Rei, like
Kudere.
what's her name from Haruhi Suzumiya?
Haruhi?
Yeah, what? Not Haruhi herself, but the character. I forget her name.
Susumina.
The
Purple
blue-haired,
chick.
emotionless one.
Yeah, basically any emotionless character in any anime that's come out after
has a different color
Evangelion
hair.
is like Rei for the most part.
She had
But
rains in your parade.
she's interesting. I feel like out
Wow.
of the main trio, she gets the least development by far.
Actually, I should probably comment on that. Anno actually did address that once. Like he did say that in retrospect, he should have he should have developed her more because like after episode 6, there was nowhere for the character to go, and Anno did realize that, and he kind of does address that in Rebuild and tries to actually do something with that character.
It's been a while since I've read the earlier parts of the manga, but as I recall, I remember there being a couple more scenes of like Shinji and her being alone and kind of developing their relationship, their kind of budding romance a little bit more, making her a little bit more human, which I think is wise because then it's all the more sad when that Rei blows herself up to save them.
It does, and
then the new Rei shows up.
Yeah, because that part was really effective. And we were kind of speculating that she was like definitely because they had said at some point that she wasn't like entirely human. So we were trying to figure out like what was going on. And this Rei, and I remember what I said because like I thought it was
She
really
was
clever
made
at the
for this
time.
job.
Is that she was like the plot of the show, and like her as much character development as she gets, is that's how much the plot gets because she is so integral to the plot. Is that
So basically, Rei 1 kind of symbolizes what the past of the show's like. Rei 2 is kind of like how the first half of the show goes, and Rei 3 is like how depressing the later half of the show gets.
It's kind of that, and then it's
That's
also
interesting.
kind of like her character because like she is so static for so much of the show, and like I said something like the amount of character, the amount that the show cares about her character, the amount that the show cares about the plot. So
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I
Which
never
is-
thought of that.
not to say not at all, but it definitely does take a back seat to like Asuka and Shinji and Misato, who are definitely the like
Character
core
driven,
of the
yeah.
show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's certainly an interesting relationship between her and Gendo,
Well,
especially when you
that's-
learn
They
about
yes.
her true identity.
Which
Yeah.
they seed it really early on, like they because Shinji used to say like, "Oh, that's kind of like something my mom would do."
Yeah,
Oh,
there's
yeah, like the
there's like
ringing
one
episode.
scene where like the show would like bad like Rei like I think like drying
It was wringing out like a washcloth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. And then I think Shinji's like, "Huh, that's something mom would do." Or like, "You look very motherly." Yeah, that was
Yeah,
yeah, that was the
I wonder
scene.
why.
yeah.
Hey.
Which is also why the dad liked her better than he liked his own son,
Yeah.
Right.
because he actually liked his wife a lot more than his son. For
Actually-
And they
some
expressed that in the
reason.
episodes later on.
Actually-
Doesn't he pretty much tell Shinji that? I can't remember. During one of the last episodes, he just straight up says something to him along those lines.
They barely
He
talk.
describes it in
really.
like End of Evangelion, but it's basically
That's what
towards
sorry, I was
himself.
thinking End of Evangelion, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically towards himself.
Yeah.
I think like doesn't it say like in the manga like there's one quote it's like as soon as you are born all the attention went to you and that's why I hated you.
Yeah.
Like Gendo
Oh.
says
That's
that.
what I meant, yeah.
Oh.
And also, I should probably mention that there is like a scene where like Yui and Gendo were talking about saying that like if Shinji was a girl, her name would be Rei. If it's a
Yeah.
boy,
Yeah.
Shinji.
Yeah,
Right. Well, actually, I remember there is a little scene in End of Eva where it's like a flashback of Gendo and Yui, and Yui's like, should we have or maybe no, it's Gendo who's like, should we have brought a child into this world, this hell of a world, after Second Impact?
As long as Ava exists, there's something.
Yeah, Yui was like, no, because there's hope for him, But I was just listening to this podcast that was talking about Ava, talking about how
listening to other podcasts, Alex.
I know.
Betrayed.
I'm talking about how
Conception.
Yui really isn't like the best mother, maybe, because, she kind of, maybe it wasn't the smartest idea to bring Shinji into the world because the world is so screwed up,
Hey, other parents did it too, so everybody's doing it. Why not? You're all screwed. Go on.
Yeah. Post-apocalyptic world.
Apocalypse.
It's great. And maybe we could talk a bit about, apparently this is your favorite character, Kenny, Kaji, who I actually liked a lot.
I love
quite
Kaji.
as well.
The thing is, why I liked him so much from the original show is just he was chill as folk, and then you found out that he was like a triple agent, more or less. Like they point out, like
that is true.
Catching up, like he worked kind of like the Japanese or Tokyo Defense. What was it like the
like the government?
I think he works for the government. He's working for Nerf. Sometimes with Gendo, sometimes against Gendo. He really was everyone's agent,
Multiple
but at all times,
personalities,
like when they're exactly. And when Nerf's actually being attacked near the end, he's just watering his watermelons. Like, man, this sucks. And then like, just talking to himself.
No.
I didn't like him at first because things were getting a little weird and a little vaguely rapey up in there, especially with him and Misato. And then, like, as it went on, I liked him more, but I don't think I ever really liked him because I don't think I ever trusted him. Because of that first impression, and then you were right because nobody trusted him. So,
Yeah.
But like, it's actually in episode 15 where he shows Misato Lilith, or what he calls Adam, but he shows her terminal dogma. He is the one character in the show who's trying to go after the truth of Seele and Third Impact and all these sorts of things.
And that's why he dies.
And he does die.
He does.
And he dies for that.
Sadness.
And then Misato carries that torch. In the later part of the show, she's the one who's really investigating, trying to learn the truth.
Than she.
Because Misato is probably my favorite character in this whole show.
Oh, good taste.
I mean,
because
yeah,
she is at least outwardly the most like normal person.
She drinks like it's her gosh dang job. It's just
is.
impressive.
She does do that.
Well, she's
on her off days.
And
The
then, like all the other
I know.
characters, it turns out things are interesting.
Yeah, she's an interesting character. It's like fun to see her. Fun. It's like interesting to see her develop.
It is.
Yeah.
I think that her part of the end is probably one of the best done parts.
Oh yeah.
Like her introspection.
Oh
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
In episode
Because
25.
we actually learn a lot more about her character as they really break down her walls.
Yeah. Well, she does a moment like that earlier on in the show, but I think it kind of came out of left field because she's just walking home with Kaji after a party or something, and then she breaks down talking about like how she hates her father and he was like her. Kaji is like her father, so she's attaching herself to him. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it kind of came out of nowhere in that episode, but episode 25 does do it a little better. What are you saying over there, Kenny?
What? Oh, sorry. No, we're having a little secret conversation.
Oh,
I said
secret-
Alex is really cool,
Secret conversations.
And then I said Alex
huh?
is really awesome.
and he should never go to other podcasts again.
Exactly.
Never
Except for mine.
I've never listened to other podcasts.
Except for mine.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe Kenny's.
Yay.
And then maybe Austin's.
Apparently.
Yeah, no, anything.
All right, and then there's Ritsuko, the scientist lady.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fun.
her
Magi.
with her
She's a character,
Magi and her mom, and
I like her.
I like her.
Yeah,
too.
no, she was a good character.
Well, I don't know if I ever liked her because whenever like it came to a tough situation, Misato was usually the one like trying to defend the pilots, and she's like, the pilots' lives are insignificant in this case.
She was a
They
scientist
were
in
trying
that.
to represent the two sides of the, what is expendable and then what isn't like, arguments, especially when it comes to like warfare. And then since Shinji's dad was just the biggest asshole in the universe and thought his son was like literally the least worth life in the universe, apparently. Like he seriously treated everybody else but Shinji's life better.
Well, yeah, but he doesn't really care about anybody.
He doesn't
He's
really
kind
care
of
about
just
anyone.
obsessed
He's-
with Yui.
With
really.
Yue and Ray by extension.
Yeah.
Well, kind of. He really uses her more as a tool than anything.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of. I don't know. It's weird. Because, once again, his dad's thing was, like, so buried in the plot, which, like I said, never is.
Right.
Like, maybe my biggest problem with the show is that the plot never gets resolved. But
Well,
I'm
no
okay.
duh.
But I love the ending regardless.
The truth is blank.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't. And we'll talk about that when we get to the end. Because I assume we have a lot to say about the end.
Most likely.
Oh yeah.
Where were we going with this? I got distracted.
I got distracted by the pretty lights.
I got
Lights,
distracted by
lights,
lights.
lights.
Oh, there is that Mac thing back there.
But apparently you hate Macs, so
I do
why would
hate
you be
Macs.
distracted?
I don't know. They have
You son
cool
of a
wallpapers or screensavers. They have
what
cool
they all say.
screensavers.
Yeah, I will say
Gendo planted it there.
if we go back to our discussion of like the episodes themselves, we talked a little about the Toji arc already. After that is episode 19, where Shinji, runs away again, from he's not going to pilot the Eva anymore. And I will say, I have my complaints about Shinji, but that was one time where I was like, okay, that is legitimate reason to run away. You were forced through this dummy plug system to beat the living hell out of your friend, you even know it was your friend as it turns out. So it makes sense for you to get fed up with your dad and run away after that.
Unit 3.
And then he found out that Kanji waters watermelons.
Indeed.
Fun fact.
And that's one of the episodes where there's an actual tension because the angel makes its way down into Nerve, is attacking the pyramid.
Yeah, and he's like,
Yeah.
oh dear. Well,
There
watermelons.
was definitely one point though where the military dropped an N2 mine on it and it exploded, did nothing, of course.
Yeah.
But Kaji and Shinji were perfectly okay, even though they're right next to that
Yeah,
angel.
the nuclear fallout, it would have killed them. I mean, but still, it's because plot armor.
armor.
And
The watermelons.
Watermelons absorb radiation. Everyone
Actually,
knows that.
That actually is that's actually I think my favorite fight in the whole show is that's when Ava Unit 1 just goes completely
Yeah.
off the chain and
That's
just starts
when it
ripping out of
officially
its
goes berserk.
armor and just beating the crap out of that angel. I'm like, yes.
Because that's
yes.
when he's fighting it.
This
shuts
is what
down.
I want.
And that's you were talking about the last angel, right?
It's
Or
not the
no, I'm
last
sorry, not
angel.
excuse me, but the one that's
yeah.
about to kill Shinji and then or kill the Ava and get to him, and then it goes berserk and she awakens and kills it.
It's
Yeah,
the one with
right.
the extendable arms.
That's
Yeah,
the one.
yeah,
This
yeah,
is the one that after he
I think it's like
kills
the-
his best friend and
It's like
he-
Bastille or something. I just looked that one up a few minutes ago.
Yeah, and that what's apparently important there, even though this isn't really well explained in the show, is that it eats part of the Ava eating the S2 engine, which gives it the capability to not have the battery plug, basically.
Yeah.
And they say something in End of Ava about how he needed that plus the fuse with Lilith because the N2 engine is part of Adam, and then Lilith is Lilith, so by combining both with the Evangelion, it becomes this perfect being, which I don't really get because the Ava's already based on Adam, so why did it need the N2 engine in the first place?
So it could be wireless.
We've upgraded these Avas. Now they're
It is
wireless.
2015.
Yeah, right?
Ava Unit 1.1,
Yeah.
We got the upgrade, Android. Right?
apparently.
Also, if I can make one little nitpick of that scene where
Do it.
the Ava's eating the angel, how the sound effect they use is the most generic squishy sound ever.
Oh, yeah.
That's true. But that was so cool when it
It-
just started eating it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh god.
And
this
Shinji's
is
face,
awesome.
I feel the same way. 'Cause
I
he's
mean,
like,
it was a really cool scene. I just didn't like that sound
Yeah,
effect.
The bridge bunnies just having this look of awe to them. Oh my
Yeah,
lord.
because then the eyes go all white. And I love that. Actually, I really think that's
Yeah.
really
Well,
cool.
whenever Ava Unit 1 goes berserk, that's
I know.
a pretty
I love
cool
that. I was
moment.
like, oh,
It's pretty awesome.
that was so cool.
I will say, talking about that, basically, when Kaji's talking to him in the watermelon patch, he basically is. It's weird because he talks about how if the angel gets into terminal dogma, humanity is screwed. Basically, third impact.
Yeah.
We're all dead. And Shinji is kind of that's kind of what convinces him to go back to pilot the Ava,
Yeah.
which seems really weird to me because we knew that from the beginning.
No,
Didn't Shinji
see-
know that?
No, see, one of the things that I actually really, really like about this scene is, and this is something that's treated throughout the whole show. Every time Shinji tries to run away from this, because this is the last time he tries to run away from being the Ava pilot, and the one he gets to fire this in, is every time they keep Misato and Asuka yell at him, for being a coward or being weak.
Backhammer.
But he, during that
Tabaka.
speech, presents it to Shinji as a choice. I'm not going to judge you either way, but you have a choice as a person. I'm not trying to force your decision. This is all what you want out of your life. You can leave humanity. You can abandon it if you want, and I won't judge you. Or you can go and save it, because you're the only one that can. And that's the first time in not the whole show, but in a decent chunk by that chunk of the show that that Shinji is treated by an actual person.
Well, because
choices.
Kaji is one of the characters who actually acts like a normal person.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which
For one, and two, actually, I remember back when both times actually that Shinji ran away, Masato would talk to him, and she was like, he says I'll pilot the Ava, I understand, I'll do it, and she's like, no, not if you don't want to pilot it, you have to make a choice, and so she lets him run away, so she gives him the choice too,
she does, but
she wants him to pilot it,
she
obviously.
totally wants him. I think that the way he presents that choice is what got Shinji to do it, because he's like, no, I'm being treated like a person for once.
And I don't think Kanji actually like classified that as like a choice. It's like the speech is, I think if I recall correctly, Kanji was going like something
Dark side.
Something dark side.
I don't know what to say, but you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. He presents as more of an ambiguous choice than versus like a choice of like, this is the right thing to do.
Yeah,
this is
Free
the wrong
will
thing to do.
versus
This is
something.
it's like, just you can do it if you want.
Right.
Like, and I think that's what gets to him, because he's being treated like a person,
Yeah,
But-
exactly. Not like getting the
not
robot
like
Shinji.
a tool.
Right. I think part of my issue with Shinji's whole arc in the show is that I understand why Shinji is depressed all the time.
Well,
He is,
you would be too.
I know. That's why I said I understand why. His father is horrible. He has a bad past. He has like no family or friends who really seem
Forced
to
to
care
fight
about
angels.
him. You know, he forced to fight angels. I get it.
Yeah,
At
it's
this-
a pretty rough.
Father
time.
leaves him at age 5.
Right. And he so like I think Shinji's whole depression psychological, downward spiral is an interesting story to tell. Part of the problem with it though is that it's being put up against, if you don't pilot the robot, then humanity is doomed. And it's kind of hard to sympathize with, okay, Shinji, I understand you have daddy issues, but if you don't pilot the Ava, we're all dead. So when you weigh one boy's feelings against the whole human race, it's kind of
But you see,
one outweighs
but,
the other.
but a lot of people do treat it that way in the show, and that's what his
Right.
problem is because he doesn't want to be treated like that.
Yeah, 'cause he
he
understands.
wants to be treated as a person who
Right.
he wants people to like say good things about him, and then
Praise him.
And
because of that,
Well, see,
they
that's
only
what-
treat they
and
only say nice things
that's how
about
people with depression feel like.
him.
Yeah, no, it's 100% true.
But when Kaji talks to him, he tells him, if the angels get down into terminal dogma, humanity is doomed.
Yeah.
Shinji goes and fights after hearing that. It's almost as if Shinji didn't know that if he
No,
lost, humanity was doomed.
He knew, but like
He's
I
the-
said, it's the way he tells it to him.
yeah, no, I
Right.
mean,
It's the subtext. It's not what he actually
Going
says.
along
It's
with
how
that.
he tells him.
like
Exactly.
Andrew said, like, how he said, like, he just needs some approval. That's why it's so powerful at the end. Like, not, the end of Evangelion, the movie, but the episode 26, everybody's clapping for him. Like, that's kind of like, Shinji, you did it.
See,
Great job,
Because
kid.
the whole
Great
point
job.
of his psychological introspection is that like people only say nice things about him when he pilots the robot well, and he doesn't want to pilot the robot. He doesn't like himself when he's putting on the show for other people. You're right. People do like that's the way the world reacts to him. Like, no, you have to pilot this robot because we do all die. But that doesn't make him happy. That's just something that they're forcing him to do by putting societal and pressure on him. And that's what's making him more and more depressed. And that's what makes the show so interesting for his character.
Right, but then at the same time, you have those earlier episodes like 7 through 13, like we talked about, where he doesn't have a problem piloting the Ava anymore. He's like, okay, I'm going to pilot it. He's gone past that arc of his character.
They get through the PTSD arc really quickly, which I appreciate.
Right, and he's fighting in the robot every week. He's meeting new people. He's growing more attached to Misato. His father compliments him at that one point,
Which was the biggest thing for him.
He gets a little closer to Asuka,
Yeah.
closer to Rei. So and he doesn't show any of his signs of like PTSD.
Yeah.
in those episodes.
because they're being
So-
nice to him.
Yeah.
Well, right, but it seemed like he was growing. Like, okay, I can pilot
And-
the Ava, and I can be a good person.
And then he's forced to murder his best friend because his father's an asshole.
See,
well,
the
right.
problem is
That's
that
why
was-
he relapses.
Yeah, that's
Because
the-
you would relapse.
Well, yeah, that's the one time in the show I'd hope that might be happy at the ending, and my friend's like, oh no.
Like that's because that's the fight after that one.
Right.
That's why he's struggling with it again. Because the last time he got on the robot, he almost murdered his best friend.
Right, his dad forced him to, and I understand. And like I said, that's one of the points where I actually did empathize with Shinji because that does suck. They do that well
Yeah.
in Ava 2.0 too. He actually starts screaming at his dad and is like
do
smashing
wanna
the
watch
nerve
that.
pyramid, like wants to destroy Nerve.
I would
rather than-
actually had they not killed the robot right there, he would have I think gone on a blood rage and murdered half of Nerve.
Yeah.
In that instance,
And I couldn't have stopped
And
that easily.
and honestly, this goes back to the whole is humanity worth saving in this show thing?
Right.
It's
Might cheer it
complicated.
on.
Well, it's hard to say that though because our exposure to humanity in the show is basically the people at Nerve, and all of them are really messed up people.
They are.
We are not really exposed to a normal, psychologically sound human being in the entire show.
But isn't that like a commentary in itself?
Exactly. Are we all normal, Alex? Is there anything normal
Yeah,
about
what is
humans?
normal, Alex?
We're all unique and awful.
Who am
Actually,
I?
what
Who
is
am I?
Alex?
Who am
Alex.
I? Who are you?
Alex.
See, we do make this a joke, but the show really is asking those questions.
Are
like,
you Alex? Am I Alex?
We are all Alex.
We are.
Hasn't
We
this
all
happened
have-
before? I feel like this happened
Probably.
before. Yeah, that's right. One time.
Probably.
before-
I am Alex.
I am Schmitz.
I'm Spartacus.
Yes.
All right, so I suppose moving on, we talked a bit about Rey and Asuka's
Yeah.
kind of falls, from grace,
Yeah.
as it were, and we learn in the Rey episode, Ritsuko is forced to do the interrogation with Sele, which is apparently approved by Gendo, which kind of pushes her buttons a little too far,
Yeah.
and she goes and shows Misato and Shinji the truth about Rey and the clones, and kills
clones.
them all.
That's when things get weird. The body parts fall
also,
down.
is that the episode where Rey's Ava gets like attacked by that
Yep.
Yeah, that's where she
same episode.
she blows herself up, and then there's a
Yeah.
new Rey.
Yeah, is that
Rey
the one?
3.
Yeah, that's the one where because that's the first hint that the angels are like a collective consciousness.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, see, now this is where we get into why I like the ending. So this episode, because I don't remember what episode is that.
23.
Yeah, it's
23.
23.
Oh yeah,
That's-
23 because Kaoru's 24.
Yeah, so that's the episode where Rey is like, because she's in the robot, and the thing's like,
Right.
like digging into her,
Right.
and then she has that conversation like in that like pool, and the other Rey, the one that's like representing the angel that's burying itself in Ava, is like, don't you want to join us, like become one with us, become of one mind? Like, it's implying that the angels share a collective consciousness instead of like the individual consciousness that each human share,
Yeah.
which is a big theme at the end of the show.
Right.
Right.
And what leads into
Well,
my theory
and
about
they
what
also talk about
instrumentality is.
how, as the show goes along, it becomes more psychological. The angels are trying to like learn more about the
Yes.
human mind. Ritsuko talks about how they're all learning
they
to
keep
do
trying
this.
to establish contact, not just murder them.
Yeah,
But
this goes back to like episode 16.
Yeah,
Right.
Like the first time Shinji actually gets to talk to the angel.
yeah.
Right.
Actually, is that? Oh yeah, that's the one where they're on the train and
Yeah,
those-
episode-
and they have that like white
episode-
line where
yeah,
he's talking to
episode
himself.
16, episode 20.
When they have that
Yeah.
white line, I
Well-
thought that was like one of my favorite scenes in the whole show.
I agree
Love
that
that.
doing it. Episode 16, I think, was good, but they do kind of repeat themselves because, like you said, episode 20 is the one
Well-
where he dissolves in the LCL, and it's like a same sort of thing where he's doing some
Well-
introspective thing in his mind.
Did you notice that like in the titles it's like Weaving a Story 1, Weaving a Story 2?
Right, like the subtitles.
Yeah,
but
that's-
those two weren't back to back, were they?
They weren't.
Right. So I don't think they had the same name.
That should probably at least tell the audience that we're going back into this again. We're going to explore these topics again in this episode.
I guess, but like, what was I was rewatching those episodes because I wanted to talk about something. It was like they were asking the exact same questions in both episodes, like, why do you pilot the Ava?
But does he
I
get-
hate myself.
but does he get the same answers?
Yeah, and
some of them, yes. And there's a lot of repetition.
and the contexts are completely different.
Not really. In both cases, it's in the first case, it's like the angel is kind of talking to him. In the second case, he's kind of falling into the LCL and trying to sort of bring himself out of it, but then he kind of doesn't want to until Yui, his mom, kind of brings him out of that.
Yeah.
Come on, Shinji,
Yeah.
get out of that.
So I guess my point being, they kind of repeat themselves. It's like, well, now we're going to have everybody do that because it happens to Asuka, it happens to Rey. All of them have these.
Well,
we're going to dive into their heads
that would
sort
be
of
the
things.
the end of the show.
I'm
That's
talking even before episodes
Oh,
25
yeah.
and 26.
yeah.
Each
Well-
time they fight one of these angels, all
Yeah.
of a sudden they're going inside
Which
their
is
heads.
really cool because they're starting to like see that like this is going to be a thing that's coming on.
Right.
Yeah, I
that's
think when it
something you
comes,
want to talk about later when we
Yeah.
get to that.
We'll get
actual
to
ending.
that. I think. Is there anything else we want to talk about? Because
Well,
otherwise, episode 24.
episode 24, important
is-
episode with Kaoru.
Which yes,
The episode that changed everything.
yes.
Well, I know that amongst the fan base, episode 24 is considered to be one of the best episodes, and I could
Yes.
see why. At the same time,
Yes.
I think Kaoru is extremely rushed in that episode. He is introduced, Shinji falls in love with him at first sight like he's a Disney princess, and then they kill him off at the end of the episode.
Because that's what my roommate said. He's like, so they literally introduced this character to betray Shinji, and make his life worse.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yep.
like
it seemed like that, but then he does play a big role later
But
on.
there is something because like this is like the because he's the 17th angel,
Right,
And
he's the
this
last
is the
angel.
culmination
Spoiler.
of all of the knowledge of humanity that they have acquired.
Yeah, and he's the only human angel.
Well,
Yes.
but actually,
Well, they're all.
it was said that his birthday
Right.
was on Second Impact, so I
Yeah.
think he's actually been around for a while.
Well, he
was
has.
born a long time
he's
ago.
but he's the 17th angel, so he's
Well, right.
kind of, sort of. So yeah, and as we established, they have a collective consciousness. So he represents everything the angels have learned about humanity thus far.
I see.
And
Kara's
he-
the only one who kind of loves or emotions like that.
But he loves, I mean, because he has like such a weird dialect, which I thought was kind of interesting. But then he like because he's talking to Shinji about how much he like loves Shinji,
Right.
which is interesting because then the angels love Shinji then,
Well,
right?
I don't know. I
Maybe.
think he's
Interesting.
kind of manipulating Shinji.
He is doing
you
that
know?
too.
Maybe it's one of his own personal things because every angel has something comes with that could have been his.
Because part of the
Yeah.
point of like what Gendo's been doing and what's been going on is kind of like pushing Shinji further and further into depression, like
Yeah.
to force the Eva to go into berserk mode, you know, and to like to evolve it further and further along so human instrumentality can happen.
Yes, and at the
You know,
end of this,
so well, I think what Kaoru's doing there isn't so much genuine love as it is we're manipulating Shinji more and more. That's why he forces him to kill him,
Yes.
knowing that it's gonna screw up with his head even more. You know,
yes, he does, and that is a very effective scene. Like that's that scene where the animation budget maybe like because they're playing the music and then he's got him.
yeah,
by the arm.
Yeah.
one of the
And-
infamous scenes.
Now,
No, I really like that scene
see,
because
and I agree mostly.
It lasts for 1:06.
Well, just
I timed it.
imagine what Shinji must have been thinking in those minutes 6 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only person that like flat out said "I love you."
I'm not saying that they couldn't have made.
He's so
They
desperate
could
for
have.
that.
They could have had Shinji think for a long time before killing Kaoru. But there's a better way to do it than silence and a still shot for 6
Well,
seconds.
I mean, it wasn't silence. though,
Okay,
'cause they
not
were playing
silence.
The,
The music.
Now, I do say, and I do agree with you, Austin, for the most part. But I think
Wow.
and it's just partially with the way that it's scored, because the music swells and then it goes back down, and then it goes back down for a little while, and then he kills him. And
Okay,
I'm like,
I didn't like that.
I feel like if he killed him when the music swelled, which would have been about maybe 20-ish, 15 or 20-ish seconds earlier,
I should mention
that would have been
this
fine.
that scene wasn't in the original script. That's something I want to say that's something Ono added, but I'm not sure.
Well,
but
like
that wasn't there.
We were
initially.
like, well, this is to pad out the runtime.
Well,
that was
yeah.
our joke, but I don't know if that was an actual thing.
Probably
Probably.
because
Maybe.
because 25-26 is where the budget totally ran out. So by episode 24, they're having
Yeah,
budget
they were
issues.
having budget issues. Well, there was that scene in the elevator. Pete doesn't like that scene because he's like, it lasts too long, and he's like, I was just annoyed. I'm like, no, see, but that was the point. It was supposed to be
to
awkward.
feel what they felt.
yeah.
yeah.
So I think that they do a good job of working with what little budget they had, and they do a lot of
Yes.
effective
And
things.
I will say that when you know the context of Evangelion, knowing that they were basically running out of the budget as they went, I think they're end time. They're commendable for coming up with a series that
Yeah.
people respect at all. You know, rather
Yeah.
than the production just falling apart at the end.
Fun fact about 26: that whole episode was done in 3 days.
I
Yeah.
believe that actually.
Really? That's impressive.
I
Doesn't
actually
surprise me.
believe that because there's
So-
like not much.
So I
new anime.
I could commend
New
it
animation.
for them basically running out of a budget and pulling something that is still worth talking about out of nothing, basically.
Yeah.
I do still think that the budget issues do impact the story
See-
and impact your enjoyment of the show.
Alex,
Now,
sorry to interrupt, but question, Alex. In the podcast that you saw, did one of the guys talk about on how, like, episode 25 and 26 kind of like specify like the purpose of like quote unquote the show? Like, or am I thinking of another podcast they did?
This was a Anime News Network podcast with
Yeah, because
a
I-
guy from avageeks.com, I believe is the site.
Oh, so Carl Horn then.
I guess so, yeah. It was that guy. Him and one other guy, I don't remember. They were both from
Okay.
Ava websites of some sort.
Okay.
They didn't talk too in depth really about 25 and 26. It was
That's-
more of a general discussion.
that's actually impressive because
Well-
like that's a lot. There's a lot to say
They
there.
were specifically talking about the rebuilds at the time because
Oh.
2.0 had
Well,
just come out.
one of the guys, Zach Birchie, I believe his name is, talked about how like the last 2 episodes kind of like.
Here, talking to your microphone. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Basically, how like there are all these themes to the show, but because of what happened to the last 2 episodes, there were Ano and his buddies were kind of forced to like simplify it, going, "Okay, guys, this is what the show is about. This is what we want you to get away from this show. Here you go. This is what we want you to remember about this show." So that's something to consider at least.
Yeah, I actually have a little bit here from Toshio Okada, who's apparently one of the founders of Gainax.
Caution: be careful with his words.
Okay, well, so we have to take his with a grain of salt. Apparently, at some Expo, where he was talking to fans, he related how Anno and his staff, in addition to having troubles with the show's producers, simply did not have enough time and could not think of a way to nicely end the series. Okada based this information on conversations between himself and Anno as Eva was being finished, and he told American fans that Anno was very stressed out about the whole thing.
Two things. First of all, yeah, Anno actually was basically did the ending completely last minute. He did not think of an ending as he was making the show. And actually, another fun fact is that he actually asked the voice actors to give him ideas for the ending.
No,
Take a
actually,
poll.
that's actually kind of a cool idea, though.
Shinji,
Because, like,
how'd you end it?
as an actor, like, you have to understand your role and your character in kind of a more intimate
how do you
level.
want to end it for your character?
So
What makes sense?
that's a thing, like that do like especially in like our D&D games.
Yeah,
like,
well, I mean, yeah.
that like that's an important thing, like
It's
because you have to
character-driven.
understand
Yeah.
your character. Like the actors understand their character almost as well as the writers do.
Again,
so.
I'm just saying they should have ended with a tie to Gurren Lagann.
Yeah. Well, another one of my issues, though, with
Super
Kaoru, because I
movies.
was talking to Matt about this the other day. Matt Lund, who is a person who has been on the podcast, and Evangelion is his #1 show.
Matt.
Athlon.
In the end, it turns out that in order to make instrumentality happen, what Sele wanted to do was to send Kaoru to basically meet with Lilith, so that when that happened,
Yeah.
instrumentality would happen.
Right.
Third
Yes.
impact, all of
Right.
that. If that's the case, if that was their ultimate goal, then why not send Kaoru from the very beginning? Why did they wait so long?
Then the show would
Well-
be as fun.
Well, obviously they wouldn't have a show without it,
I-
but they need a justification within the logic of Sele.
I
Because if
actually-
that's all they needed, why not just send Kaoru immediately?
I think I have a thing for that.
All right, let's hear it.
The Dead Sea Scrolls.
Well, I agree that that's probably the excuse they would use, but the Dead Sea Scrolls are never explained.
But
so we
see,
don't.
That's the thing is that they clearly have them and they reference them a lot. Now,
But they talk about how things deviate from the Dead Sea Scrolls, so it's
But-
not like the Dead Sea Scrolls are a
but they
sacred
needed to
doctrine.
get through all 17 angels.
Why? Tell me why.
I can
Because there's 17.
Because
They gotta get
they're-
through 'em, Alex.
Because apparently the 17 angels are used to figure out what the human mind is going through.
Well,
Yeah,
but
they have to
that's
learn
that's
as
for
much
the
about human-
angels to learn about that. For human instrumentality, they just wanted to make all of humanity be turned into one consciousness.
Yes.
That was their plan from the beginning.
That
didn't
was
have-
their plan from the beginning. But I think that in order to do that, the angel we don't know exactly what the process that what he does to Lilith to make that happen. But I wonder if the angels do have a big part of that. Like I wonder if the angels are like, no, like we have to learn how humanity works in order to turn them more
Well,
like us.
Yeah.
You have not seen End of Evangelion, because
I have
in
not.
End of Evangelion, human instrumentality does happen, except
Well,
not with Kaoru, but
I
with
s-
Eva Unit 1.
I still think that instrumentality happens at the end of the show.
Well,
I think that's what the last two episodes
It does. There's End of Eva is either seen as a retcon over the first those last two episodes, or something kind of merged with it, because they present two different versions of
Yeah,
human
a lot of people do
instrumentality.
claim that those are just like it's unknown if they're supposed to be like separate things or if they're supposed to
I heard a
complement
lot
each
saying
other.
there's like a retcon. That's what I heard like most people saying.
I'm on
Okay.
the side
They are
of retcon.
called episodes 25 and
Okay.
26.
I
so,
can answer this. I can answer
Cool,
this.
cool.
So what's the question you guys want?
We're basically trying to figure out is End of Ava a retcon or is it supposed to complement the actual end of the show?
I'll say this: for the purposes of like your sanity, treat them as different alternative
So
universes.
retcons.
No. There's
Okay,
like
well,
overlapping
there's also
dimensions.
a precedent set, and I did think about this because I have not watched End of Ava, but at the end, in the last episode, in episode 26, they are jumping into Shinji's watching other realities where things are different. Is End of Ava, is that like one
Well,
of those realities
it's-
that he can be watching?
it's
Maybe.
true. It's true that in episode 26, you see a shot of Misato shot and a shot of Ritsuko in the orange liquid,
Yes.
which happen in End of Ava.
There's been theories, and I know people who kind of worked into this is like episode 25 and 26 is what Shinji is thinking, yet End of Evangelion is the reality. And I probably should mention that like actually in the show the first half of the movie was written as a script before like the movie was made. Like they did had some initial idea of what they want to do for the ending, but because of what happened, they didn't get around to it until we got like Death and Rebirth.
Yeah, the thing I've heard is basically, I think the producers have sort of left it up to debate whether it's a retcon or whether they fit together, because some people think that 25 and 26 fit in End of Ava when Shinji has gone full instrumentality, but before he basically changes his mind. Like that happens somewhere in the middle.
I should mention this. Like after episode 25 and 26 were made, a lot of people at Gainax wanted to make an Eva movie. So basically, I should probably set this for the record. End of Evangelion and Death and Rebirth are completely different things.
Right. Death and Rebirth is like a director's cut of and recap of the show.
And actually, I should say this. Have you heard that End of Evangelion was not initially like what they planned to do? What they wanted to do with Death and Rebirth was that Death was kind of like recap the whole series of, like, in the way they do it. And
yeah, I did read about that one.
And then Rebirth is just basically 20 minutes of, like, End of Evangelion.
Yes.
That basically what they wanted to do was that End of Evangelion was supposed to be Rebirth. That was the initial plan, and there was supposed to be an original movie that was going to be written afterwards, but there was time problems. There were production problems, and what happened was that basically Rebirth got split off into its own movie to replace that original movie, and that's how that happened.
Is Rebirth just the first few minutes of End of Evangelion, or is that also the recap of the series?
It's basically two halves. Death is basically an artistic recap of the entire series, and Rebirth is, as it stands, the first 20 or so minutes of the first half of End of Evangelion.
Right. And to my understanding, End of Evangelion was actually released in two parts. Episode 25, basically the first half of the movie, and then episode 26, the second half of the movie, was released somehow a little later.
As far as I know, it was released as one movie.
Really? Because actually what I read was the opposite, because in episode 26 of End of Eva, you see those shots of people watching a movie, and that was supposedly footage of people watching the first half of it.
I mean, I just looked up something on it. The way they describe it, at least for the End of Evangelion, like the remake, they describe it two separate episodes, 25 and 26.
Yeah, because they're split up into 25 and 26, and there was credits after 25, and then 26 started.
It's like maybe one movie, but two separate episodes encapsulating that time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's still like technically two.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So basically, it's left up to fan interpretation whether End of Eva replaces the TV show or whether the TV show fits into End of Eva. They kind of, I think, left it up for you to make up your own decisions.
So yeah, but for the purposes of the show, because I haven't seen End of Eva, so I'm
it's
sorry.
good. You'll like it.
I mean, I want to. I finished the show at 2 a.m. last night, so I was like, I need to do things instead of watch more Evangelion. Though at that point, I was like so hooked. I'm like, I could watch more.
What you mean
of
is
this.
let's watch more Evangelion. I was gonna say.
I do like.
Let's watch the rebuild movies.
Which and I want
will
to.
do that
I do
eventually.
want to.
All right.
I want to see, but we do have to talk about the ending.
Let's talk a bit about 25 and 26 then of the TV show.
The instrumentality.
So,
the fun begins.
Andrew, why don't you talk about why
Are you
like
sure
this?
you want me to do this? Because this is going to be really long.
That's okay. I want to hear it because you are a psychology major,
Woo!
so this is kind of your field.
Can
is
we take
my
a vote
thing.
on this?
Huh?
I'd kind of like to hear it.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So-
Slaughter. I'll give you dramatic music.
I do too.
I have, because I heard a lot, obviously, like that they've rewritten the ending. Actually, my one roommate, he said he was talking to his friend who's a big anime nerd, and he's like, "Oh, Evangelion, yeah, it took them 3 tries to get the ending right." And so we were like fully expecting this ending to be awful.
That's what.
That's what we came in with this, because like I've heard a lot of really bad things. Like a lot of people don't like this ending. I love this ending. I think that this was perfect for the show. Well, like I said, the lack of plot resolution bothers me only on like a kind of fundamentally plot-driven level. But like, it's kind of like the ending of Lost, where do you care about the plot or do you care about the characters?
Yeah.
And if you care about the characters, which the show has been trying to put front and center much more than the plots, then this is very satisfying to you because instrumentality happens. All of human consciousness merges into one as like a thing, and then this is them trying to pierce out their own individuality into a new collective society where they're all one being, and they all have to deal with their emotional and psychological trauma within each other's minds as they merge into one collective being. And it's a very chaotic thing, because it would be. Like, think about it. Like, you are merging minds with literally every other being on the planet. And that's why they always open every scene, all of those scenes, with, like, I am the Shinji in both my mind and your mind. Like, or I am the Asuka in both in my mind and your mind. And I think that's really interesting. Because I've seen a lot of people, like, that was, like, I don't remember what I saw that in, but, like, there was, like, a villain that was, like, their plan was they wanted to merge all of humanity into one thing. And I've never seen that like become like a thing or represented in a show, but I think that the last 2 episodes really encapsulate what that would be like, because they do, each of them have to walk through their own minds and figure out what is wrong with them, because in order to merge into this collective society, and how scared they are of individuality and being alone and dying alone, which this is what's accomplishing so that nobody ever has to die alone again, like, because they will all be connected forever.
Because we're all in the soup together.
But what's interesting is one of the things that I always forget his name, the 17th angel,
Karu.
One thing that he says to Shinji is only one life form can survive, and he basically says I would prefer to be you.
Right.
So he as a person is trying to say that no, this shouldn't happen. Humanity should continue to be their own thing, but they don't. So when they do merge into this thing, this is what happens. They all break down. They all have to figure out what's wrong with them. They all have to figure out why, like how this all works as they slowly merge into what is basically the beings at the end of Interstellar. Because they do transcend like time and space. They can start to see other realities. And then Shinji, especially at the end when they see the reality where they're all just a bunch of high school kids and it's funny and it's kind of goofy.
The one you saw.
But where you taken out of context, you're like, I don't know what's going on.
What do you mean?
It's so interesting. But Shinji's like, but in that reality, I can hate myself too. Because then it breaks down to that metaphor of depression, which is what the show is at the real heart of the show is like dealing with depression and dealing with social isolationism. And this is one way of solving that. Overcoming your own depression, overcoming your social isolationism. But this is maybe not the way that we should go about doing this. But at the end, and I do think that this is like Otto working through his depression a little bit. Basically. By the end of the show, because the end of the show, he's like, no, I don't have to hate myself. And it does end with them all clapping, which I know a lot of people I don't think like because it's kind of weird.
It's cheesy.
You think it's cheesy, but I think it's Otto working through, like, looking at his own characters and looking at their mentalities and working through his own mentality as he writes Shinji as like a metaphor for himself, and then him working, no, I don't have to be like this. Him challenging his own thought process through Shinji challenging his own thought process in the show, and him working through, no, I don't have to hate myself, and no, I don't have to have somebody's approval to be loved or feel loved. I can only feel loved by myself. I can love me for me.
Yep.
It's this beautiful thing.
You should be a motivational speaker, man.
Probably should. I think the ending is this beautiful thing about overcoming depression.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I'm with them.
Right.
Austin and Kenny, what are your guys' thoughts?
First off, though, you
how
got
can we-
through all that speech, so
How you go behind that? Yeah, wow.
congratulations.
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 All kinds of claps.
You can be your own person.
I can be my own person.
Maybe you could learn to love yourself.
Nah.
That would be nice, but I don't. That got depressing now.
It's hard to follow up after that, man. I mean,
It was a joke.
my original interpretation when I was young, I couldn't fully grasp because I watched the series and like just bombshelled it in 2 days. So it took me a while to grasp it. Now I get a lot more like a holistic view on it. But back in the day, I was like, "Where's the action?" So I didn't really get what was happening.
Which is what a lot of people said.
Exactly.
Like,
And
there's a
then-
GIF online. There's like a picture online where it's like one of those demotivational pictures.
Yeah.
It's like first 12 episodes, giant robots. Last 2 episodes, penguins.
Yeah,
Penguins.
See, and the thing is, like later on, like as I saw the end of the series, like I rewatched the end of Evangelion, the other one. I was like, okay, it's more action packed. I like this better. But now in introspection, like for what they had in the budget issues and all the mumbo jumbo we talked about, I mean, while they used a lot of reused footage and just kept it more or less Shinji in the room, people in their head,
Also,
like,
they broke down to using concept art at one point,
Yeah,
which
they
I
did,
thought was
yeah.
like,
Actually, storyboards.
which in the
shot some
storyboard,
scripts.
which I actually really liked though, because I think that really represented like humanity and Shinji himself having to recreate their own existence as
Exactly.
the way
Yeah.
that they would recreate
Basically
an
showing you
anime.
the process.
I thought that
That's
was
stretching it
I
a
thought that
little.
was a clever way of doing it though.
That's the way Anno works. I mean,
No.
he continued doing that like in another anime he did later called His or Her Circumstance. Like he continued to do that.
Yeah.
Like in that series.
That'd be cool.
So it's
Andrew,
not
you're
a
right.
one-time thing.
No,
Andrew, are you writing Anno's baloney pony?
No, I'm not. No, I think that's interesting because there is a scene where he's like falling. He's like, I'm falling, but then they draw the line, and he can walk on the line, and like he can walk on the ground, and that's them. That's humanity kind of like reconstituting himself, I think, or at least them
took
trying.
itself seriously.
all I was gonna say is I liked it. You guys can go ahead and keep talking.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I liked it too. The one thing that kind of peeved me was like everyone else, like not everyone not Shinji, like how they all go through their walks and then those aren't resolved. Is the thing that kind of ticks me
That
off.
is true. They are not resolved, but I think.
I mean, you don't go through all of that and just leave them like that. That's
Well,
kind of like
and-
Gainax just bragging. It's like, hey, look at the characters; they're so deep.
To the show's credit, in the beginning of episode 26, it's like we do like get to the other characters, but for the purpose of this episode, we're going to focus on Shinji.
Okay, yeah, that
for the
could
final
count.
episode, but
It makes sense.
I do want to wonder though, is there a thing with that? Like, because if humanity is all sharing a consciousness at this point, is Shinji overcoming his own crippling depression representative of like everybody
Humanity getting
overcoming? They're like, is he like Is he just the audience surrogate for humanity overcoming all of their crippling depression and social issues?
I say it's a bit more complicated than that.
It kind of
it's just
depends
a
on
theory.
whether
I'm throwing
End
things
of
at the wall.
Eva is like a compliment or not.
Yeah, and I haven't
Because-
seen End of Eva, so
Oh,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
speak
Yeah,
to that.
The thing I saw was that the TV show ending is human instrumentality kind of succeeding and Shinji accepting it, whereas in End of Eva he rejects it in the end.
Yes.
Yeah, he's like an if that is.
So like, because like you say, it's like he finds his answer and then like maybe he's able to join everybody. You know.
Yeah, and then he doesn't have to feel isolated or alone anymore, and he can go rejoin society as like a whole.
And I'm kind of the opposite of what you said, Austin. What they brought up with the other characters, with Asuka, Rei, Masato, I actually did find to be pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
actually, I really like Masato, especially.
Yeah,
I think we
especially-
learned a lot more
It got
about her
deeper than we ever would
character.
have gotten anywhere else because we can't really be in her head for a lot. I mean, we have in
I
some
like
points, but
I like
not.
the journey that we took, but there's no like end goal.
I do
Which
see what you're saying. I do think that they could have
It makes
resolved them a
sense.
little
But yeah,
bit
I still
more.
liked it though.
I mean, like, I get that it's not important to the story because Shinji's the main character, but like, you don't take us on that journey if you're not going to end it.
Well, it was interesting because when I was listening to that A&N podcast, the guys there were talking about how, at least in their opinion, this is just their opinion or whatever, but that Evangelion was more interesting for the questions it raised than the answers it gave.
Oh yes,
basically.
I agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
And I could see that perspective because like I said, I liked, actually, because I just rewatched those episodes yesterday, and I liked the bits where we went to Asuka, we went to Masato,
I do
we went
like
to
those
Rei, and then some of the stuff that Shinji's talking about is interesting. I feel like they kind of talk themselves in circles
No, actually,
sometimes.
I really like a lot of things because I like the whole part where it's like a part of like who you perceive yourself are is how other people perceive you. I think that's really cool because that is a very base psychological concept. Because our memory, all right, here's the thing. Here's my psychological lesson for the day. Your memory is crap. It is.
Oh,
Well,
It
you
is
didn't need to tell
shoddy.
me that.
It
I
is
already have.
No,
bad memory.
like it is shoddy at best. So a lot of what humanity does, like a lot of what people do and how they inform their own personality is how they interact with the environment and how the environment reacts to them.
So you feel like punch a shark and it bites you?
Yeah, kind of like that, but except like you may not remember
Emotionally?
punching the shark,
You're like, I remember
So-
shark bit me.
but like the shark going up to bite you, you're like, no, I don't like having a shark bite me. That's a very crappy example, but thank you, Ken.
I was thinking emotional shark
Yes,
biting.
an emotional shark, like walking up to like I don't know. It's hard to explain.
the
'Cause
shark
show
bite of your feelings.
deals
Exactly.
a lot with like tries to explain a lot of these really hardcore philosophical, metaphysical concepts about like how you perceive yourself, which
Yeah.
is important to talking about how depression works as a thing. And I think that was
But
really
basically, my issue with episode 26 is basically the conclusion that is reached. Because, like we say, they go to the alternate universe episode, kind of shows the Shinji that's in human instrumentality that other realities can exist.
where he's not depressed.
Where he's not depressed.
But in those realities, I could hate myself.
Right. But he sees that, and then he sort of like, they all talk to him a little bit, and then he like sort of reaches this conclusion, and everyone starts clapping congratulations. I basically just didn't buy it. I didn't feel like it was earned. Because, like, allow me to read you the exact last few lines that he says, this big, psychological rise out of depression. He says, I am me. I want to be myself. I want to continue existing in this world. My life is worth living here. Like, there's no big reveal there. It's
Well, there doesn't have to
We
be a
don't
big
need it.
reveal
It's him,
because
like,
it's
getting
about
over his own
him
depression, yeah.
understanding.
It's supposed to be simple, nothing too superfluous. It just is what it is.
Exactly. It's supposed to be him learning to just want to be him.
I don't know,
Like
Alex, when you
not
said-
not the person that he wants them all to be. Because all they want him to be is the Ava pilot. All they want him to be is a tool to help win this war. He wants to just be him. He just wants to be a kid who lives a nice, normal life where he doesn't have to fight giant robots and his father's not an asshole.
I get that, but the problem is there were parts of the show that showed that the people did want him, did value him beyond just
But
being the
he
robot
was
pilot.
depressed, and he doesn't see that.
But like Misato, who once again she was my favorite character, she was legitimately trying to be like a good parent to Shinji. She was trying to
was.
make him come out of his shell, grow up.
Until
you know.
Kaji died, and then she just kind of...
Well, then
was-
she
Well,
went, then she spiraled. So
Yeah, she spiraled a bit. At that point, they were focusing more on like
and,
she was more
and then
being
Asuka spiraled
Detective
right after
Misato.
that too. So
But the point being that I don't buy the fact that Shinji's like everybody hates me, because there clearly were some people, some things that like showed that there was value for him in the real beyond being the Ava pilot, like like Asuka getting, sort of developing this weird love-hate relationship with him. Rey
I like
was
that.
developing, more of a bond with him.
Like a personality.
Yeah, Rey developing more of a personality than, just being a robot.
Yeah.
So the point being, he did have that, and like
But he was depressed. See, a depressed
But
person
you-
wouldn't get that. Like they would just look at all the negative things. They would look at like all the things that he just saw all those
but he
people
showed
being nice to him.
But he showed signs of recovery, like
and
I
he
said.
did, but
in
people
those
relapsed. He
You can-
relapsed
after
when he
killing his
was
best
forced to
friend,
murder his best friend.
Well, he didn't murder his best friend.
Well,
though.
he
His best
thought
friend,
he almost did, and that was scary enough.
he almost did, but Toji was fine in the end, which is
He
why I
was,
think he
which
should
is
have died.
I do agree he should have died. That part is like one of my biggest criticisms.
I was just
of the
really
show.
impressed he did live after that. Like
Yeah,
nobody
he
else
did.
would have.
Yeah, he really.
Yeah.
He really
But
should have
Masato was like
He
trying to
should've
be like, I'm sorry, Shinji, I was trying to tell you, no, this is this terrible thing, blah, blah, blah. It's not like, I mean, Gendo was being completely unsympathetic.
Well, he was
and
an
he's
asshole,
A,
so-
he's a dick. Like, we can accept that.
He's the world's
But
biggest
there were
asshole.
other people who were like trying to help him through
He
that.
was, but like he was so enveloped in his own depression that he couldn't even perceive that they were helping him. He thought they were just helping him so that he could pilot the robots, because that's all they ever cared. Because that's what he thought they really cared about, not him. Because that's how depressed he was.
I mean, some
that
people
is
do.
how low and how broken his logic was by that point.
I guess. I don't know. It's hard for me to rationalize.
See, but that's the thing. Because
Shinji.
depression isn't rational.
Well, right.
It's
And-
a very irrational mindset.
And I could appreciate the people, because there are people who like watched Evangelion who had issues with depression and really empathize with the show, and I can respect it for that. And I will say I can't approach the show from that perspective at all, because I have never really experienced
Well-
depression myself.
Well, Alex, okay. Well, maybe that's why I like it more, because I have a lot in
Well,
my life.
maybe.
So
Yeah,
I
no.
understand where Shinji comes from. So I do get his like mentality,
Yeah, a lot
like
of us
how he
understand that,
thinks,
so.
and that's what makes it more interesting. I think that, and then Ano, who also was suffering from like crippling depression at the time,
he was.
really understood. Like that was the message he was trying to get off. It was for people like him. He was trying to show that people like him didn't have to like suffer, like no matter how bad it is, that
It's
you do have
true.
to live for who you are. And maybe somebody who isn't suffering from depression doesn't get that as well, and they just think it's irrational and annoying. And that's kind of almost a commentary on like how people perceive depression as is, because people would look at depressed
All right.
people like that is a irrational thing that you're doing.
I
there.
understand that, and I can appreciate that, and I get that the point of 26 is to take Shinji from I hate myself to I want to live as myself.
Yeah.
But what was it about episode 26 that actually changed him? Like specifically, what made him change his mind? Because I'm unclear on that. That's why the episode falls flat to me.
Was
That's
it
up
the
to you to
alternate
decide.
reality?
Well,
The ulti-
you got to tell me why. Why did it happen? Because it's unclear to me. So if someone could explain it to me, I would love to love the episode.
Alex is getting mad.
Well, because this is one of my biggest issues with the show is
And
the ending.
So, all right, and we'd have to actually.
You'd
sit
have
down,
to
like,
see
look
like
at
the
everything.
entire like
We would have to like
script, just
like
to see.
literally look through everything that they did
Can't
at
we
this
call
point.
what's his face on the
But
phone? The guy who made it.
Otto, hey, I have a
What's up,
question
bro?
Yeah, he's
about
my
the
buddy.
ending of Ava,
My
the
dad
first
works
one.
at Nintendo.
Hey, look at
My
that.
dad works at Gynax.
He knows.
Hey, Otto, no, the first ending, that. We have some questions.
We're still talking
Yeah,
about
you
that.
and everybody else.
You guys are still talking about this? Move on.
Move on. It's been
Yeah.
20
That's
years.
exactly what
They
he'd
actually
he
say.
had-
would say that.
Wait, fun fact, I actually got a direct answer about that, because I was going to say, sorry to deviate for a bit, but at the panel I went, where, like, the head of, like, Gynax America was there, the U.S., and I've seen him quite a few times, and him and, like, a lot of the voice actors were there, and this is just when the new box set came out, like, the new HD, this is back in the day, like, 2009 or something, and I remember, he said, like, if you guys ask anything about the ending, we have a set answer, so if you're going to do it, we'll tell you what it is, because they've been asked so many times,
I'm
and
sure they
finally
have.
someone was like, what about the ending? And the guy just looks him right in the eyes and goes, buy the box set. And then, like, ends the panel. So that was the
Buy our
answer.
merchandise.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that's the answer I found out.
Okay. Buy the merchandise. If I buy the merchandise, then I will understand
you'll
episode
understand.
26.
Yes, that's fair. No, I would
For
have
real,
to
though.
look at like
If I
literally. It made sense to me watching it, but I had to look at everything they say to him after the alternate reality section. Because after the alternate reality section, he looks at a version of himself that doesn't hate himself, and part of that is he realizes that there is a way. Because he's looking at it, and he's like, "There's clearly a way that I can be that person, a person that doesn't hate themselves."
Because I think he's like,
Well,
part of it was like, deep down he wants to be like.
yes. Well, like I said, deep down he just wants to be loved
but
by something.
I think that falls apart of it, because the reason why he wasn't depressed in the alternate reality was because he actually had a healthy family life and friends at school and all those
Exactly.
things. His life wasn't crap. So just saying, okay, well, if my life wasn't crappy, I would not be depressed. No duh. my life is depressed. My dad does suck. My mom is dead. I don't have any friends. So how do I move on from that?
See, that's the thing, though, is that, like, he looks at that and he's like, there is a version of me that isn't depressed. Like, yes, all those things did have to happen for him not to be depressed. But that's a very challenging thing to him with depression, because he's looking at that and he's like, there is a version of me that cannot be depressed. I don't have to be this way. Like, this is not a universal constant in my life that I have to be depressed. I can move on. Like, there are other ways. And then I do think, because then they start flashing with, like, literally every character from the show talking to him. And I have to look at what they say exactly, because like I said, it was like...
So what it comes down to is we can't tell you, Alex.
It was 2 in the morning when I watched it. I'm sorry. There was a lot of things going on. I was thinking a lot about this. I think that, because they were trying to, like, cheer him up. Like, they were all saying, like...
Well, right. They were saying these positive things.
Yes. So, and those are the versions that are both in his mind and in their minds of themselves. So... This is like him seeing. This is them talking to him as they really are and as he sees them, which cuts away a lot of like the societal masks that we put on. Like Asuka, a big part of Asuka's thing is that Misato's thing, both of them, is that they put up this front that they're much stronger and much bolder than they actually are, and deep down they're really depressed people. So when the instrumentality happens, you break down all of those like societal constructs that we put around it, all those walls we build around ourselves, and he's starting to see how people really think about him and how they really do. Some people really do care about him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and do you ever think to
what do I need this for?
Seriously
I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what to do with 173 pages of Evangelion, but
you now have Ava.
Chase just gave him
$5 a paper.
Gave him the 100-page
I got
paper.
$5.
You have been passed the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Those are the Dead Sea Scrolls. We were wondering what they were.
Cool.
Your
Okay,
answers
I
are
want to
there.
know how the world is gonna end.
Go to page 158.
158.
All right. So fine. We're at this point. Now, should we just sort of like wrap up our conversation, or should we talk about our thoughts of the TV show and then dive into End of Evangelion?
Well, if you want to talk, I have to leave the room if we talk about End of Eva.
Yeah, to be fair to
I haven't
Andrew, we
seen
probably
it
shouldn't
yet.
talk about that.
But no, you guys can talk about it. I just can't hear.
And it's also like 10:50, so I mean, just throwing that out there.
Just throwing that out there. Okay, because
we talked about a good amount.
I mean, we talked about a good amount of things. I watched End of Eva the other day, so I have some thoughts about it.
I mean, like about we did talk a little bit.
I mean,
about
let's just say this. We won't say any spoilers about End of Eva, but for those who have seen both, which version do you prefer, the TV show or End of Eva?
Oh, End of Eva.
End of Eva.
Neither.
All right, explain that then, Chase.
Oh.
Basically, I consider them both valid endings to the series. Simple as that, really.
So you think they're the same, basically?
More or less.
Interesting. I don't know. For me personally, I think the End of Eva, like the end of the TV show, has a bunch of difficult story problems to it, that don't fully wrap things up for me. But End of Eva, unlike the end of the TV show, End of Eva was like visually really stunning. Like the animation in that is amazing.
Well, when they got the
Production
budget
IG.
again, it looked fantastic.
Like it is definitely, I will say, one of the most interesting depictions of an apocalypse I've ever seen. And the music was awesome. So those elements of it I really did like, but I find Shinji's whole development in that movie to be really schizophrenic.
Yeah, like the one whole sequence when the big apocalyptic thing happens.
I was gonna say
that was like an awesome song.
It was cool, but Shinji's choices in that movie were also questionable, especially near the end. You're like,
Yeah, because they make Shinji even more depressed than he was in the TV show, and I quite
That's
don't
impressive.
get the jump to
That's
that.
Yeah, that's because he was like,
impressive.
wait,
That's a level.
He saw a lot more stuff in the.
Well, right, but
okay.
I'm saying at the start of End of Eva, which is
I-
supposedly going right off of the TV
that
show.
I can't. I did read like what happened because I was reading the synopsis. I'm like, I wonder what End of Eva is about. And like the first sentence, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Scene
Yeah,
with
I did-
Asuka.
yeah,
oh,
yeah, that's
Yeah, I was just watching. It's like, oh, we're going there.
oh.
We're
I was
going-
like, oh,
we're
that
starting on
that
this.
changes things.
First time I saw it, I didn't really get what was happening. My friend's like, let's rewind that real quick.
oh,
See, do we need to sit down and have a talk,
Kenny
Kenny?
should-
Oh, I got it
Kenny
pretty
should
shortly
be
after.
honest.
That's how Otto sees you.
Yes.
Oh.
That is you, otaku fan base.
But seriously, it's more complicated than that.
everything.
Supposedly everything's more complicated. All right, so yeah, those are my thoughts on End of Eva. So I guess getting to overall thoughts about Evangelion, because I have some complex thoughts about the show, obviously.
Yeah, me too.
But
I just liked it.
Let's see. Actually, yeah. Austin, why don't you go first? Because I got to gather my thoughts on this.
Okay, I kind of gathered my thoughts on this too, but I mean,
Well, I can talk about it. I just thought it through a lot.
All right, Andrew, you go.
Okay, so I've been still processing it since last night because, like I said, it's been less than 24 hours since I finished this show. So there's a lot to process there.
Right.
Processing it right here.
Right here.
Over the last
live.
hour.
You are literally hearing the gears in Andrew's head turn as we speak.
Andrew,
I
don't
have
explode.
determined that this is one of my favorite anime ever, and that I love this show to death now.
Interesting. Even though that there is no conclusion to the
See,
plot.
it's funny because one of my
end.
second favorite TV show of all time is Lost, which has no plot resolution at all because the ending is all about the character development. And I think overall I like characters more than I like plot. I like plot. Like, I do think plot needs to be resolved.
It's
but
very important.
there was a point where, like, because this show and Lost very similarly put the characters in front more than the plot. Like, the plot was something interesting that was going on that you were like wanted to find out about, but putting the characters in front and then giving you the characters ending in a much like very deep and interesting way, I think actually serves the plot a lot. Like, it serves the show a lot better, and I actually found it a lot more interesting that way. I really love the show. I think the only problem with it is the middle arc where they were kind of like goofing around was maybe not as effective as the rest of the show.
I mean, it stands out from the rest of the show
It does.
because it's so tonally different.
But overall, I really, really like this show, and I think I have to reorder my top 5 anime now.
Told you,
Write
man.
more lists. Make
I-
more lists like me.
Well, Alex, I cannot get to my top 50.
Actually, it's top 75 now.
Oh my god!
Alex, you're a real person. We have to accept that.
That's right.
Sometimes
I
just
can't
wonder.
I couldn't even name 75 like movies.
I can name like 5 animes.
I could do.
Well,
a top,
you constantly
I could-
forget what
I-
your top is
I
because you
could do
forget
a-
about
yeah,
shows.
I have a lot of things I
I
like.
could probably do
I
a
have
top
a top
10 anime by this
500.
point because of you, Alex.
Gendo, I
But
love
this is definitely going in the top 5, so now I have to kick something out. I'm gonna go
right.
think about that.
All right, Kenny, final thoughts.
Ava's been my favorite since I first saw it. It was like a psychological thriller from the beginning to the end. It petered out near the end, like you said, with a lot of,
I like it.
just like I love it. I mean, a lot of like the plot things, like plot holes are glaring, like things like that. But at the same time, the young me loved it for the action. The older me likes it for the psychological stuff they tackle.
Like the last half of the show had like.
Exactly. I mean, that's
Well, I
the
mean, there
thing.
were some cool fight scenes, but
Yeah, and I just liked it because like a lot of things with the angels, what they represented, why they came there, like the meanings of their names, and what it was cool. I like delving into the enemies a lot, which turned out to be are they enemies? Whoa, that kind of thing. So I mean, just a lot of things you can ask about the show. I just like it's a show you can keep like analyzing and never quite get an answer out of.
All right, Chase.
Short answer, I like it. Long answer, I consider it one of the most important TV series to come to animation in the 90s.
All right, and Austin.
even though there are a couple bumps in the road, it's definitely a very worthwhile journey to take, and I consider it one of my favorites.
Name a bump on the road. Just curious.
Just my
Literally a
quips
bump?
over the ending, basically, and
Okay.
like some of the plot holes.
All right. Well, as for myself, I say Ava's a good anime. I'm not
Thanks.
going to
That's
say
pretty
Ava's a bad anime. Ava's a good anime because there are parts of it, Ava, that I really, really love. Like, I love the design of the Avas. I love the premise, the whole Sele idea, Nerve, this post-apocalyptic world, the mysteries about the second impact, because unlike you, Andrew, I really did get invested in the plot. I wanted to know what Sele was up to. I wanted to know what human mentality was going to be.
It wasn't that I wasn't invested in the plot, but
Well, but the point being, since the end of the TV show doesn't answer those questions, that's why I was left. Part of the reason why I was left feeling so unfulfilled.
yeah, I know. But
I
it's one of those weird examples where like the villain wins in the end because instrumentality.
Oh, but we don't even
happens.
know if Sele started instrumentality.
Well, I mean, something started instrumentality, and his dad wanted that, and his dad.
Oh, right. Well,
Satan,
you could argue it's Sele, or was it Gendo, or was it Shinji?
I mean, who
Alex,
knows? But
you can say you're asking too many questions.
Asking too many questions.
so I mean, Kenny.
Hey,
I mean, sometimes you just
Hey.
can't win everything. I think that's interesting too. That's
Well-
an interesting ending.
Because part of what I look at Ava as is as a filmmaker and as a screenwriter and storyteller myself, because that's what I do.
I understand.
And
that.
what
I
Ava,
look at it that way too.
like I said, and part of Ava's like psychological stuff is well done. When it tells its psychological stories through the narrative, I enjoy it. Like, I like how they did it with Asuka, where she had this false bravado throughout the whole show, and then became pretty obvious, that she was attaching her self-confidence to her performance as an Eva pilot, and as her sync ratio went down, she started to get more and more desperate, envying Shinji more, hating Rei, all these sorts of things, to the point where you saw her slide down into Depression Land. So I like that.
Depression Land.
Everyone's
High
favorite
fives
place. Versus all of like the inner monologues that we do in Eva, which is basically the opposite of show don't tell. It's telling, without showing it. It's being very blunt with what it's doing.
Which is fair, but I think that they do it in an interesting way. Which I know you don't, but maybe you're just not a fan of the way that they do it.
Yeah,
I think that they,
as a storyteller, it's basically the laziest way to write, to sit somebody down and say, okay, I'm opening up a psychology textbook and now I'm going to tell you about my issues,
I don't know if that's like,
rather than trying to get to the character issues through what happens in the story.
I don't know if it's the lazy way, but I do think, or at least the way they did it was the lazy way, because they talked about some really heavy things there that would go over a lot of people's heads, which is a really
maybe blunt is a better word.
But that I would agree with. I do think it's more of I wouldn't say lazy, but because I know that there's this whole show don't tell thing, but I don't think that that's a hard and fast rule that people like to think it is. Like, a lot of writers like to pretend that like the show don't tell rule is like a law to live by as a writer, when I really think that there are times that you should just tell people what's going on, instead of trying to find like some way to bury it as like a thing. And
I agree.
Yeah, and actually, because I was bringing that up in an argument I was having with somebody about Eva, it can be done well. As an example, I'm pretty sure I'm the only one here who has seen it, but The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya has a long, 8-minute scene where Kyon, the main character, does this self-introspection interrogation thing where he's getting at his true motivations. And it's my favorite scene in the whole movie, and I love that movie to death. One of the things they do with it, though, is that they kept it entertaining and also visually interesting. Wow. Whereas with Evangelion, a lot of those scenes are just very static images.
I liked a lot of the storyboard things, though. I thought that was a really unique way of dealing with what was clearly just their budget struggles at that point. I thought they were making the best of it.
How many times is Shinji going to interrogate himself on that subway with the sunlight?
I like those things, though, because then they have that line thing, and then it goes, and then the one is vertical and the one's horizontal. I thought that was really cool.
It was cool the first time they did it. Then they repeat it over and over.
Yeah, they really didn't.
Two more times.
Well,
they did it 3 times in the show. So
it's 2 times too many.
I mean
it's reusing your animation budget.
Well, they were trying to, like I said, they were out of money, so
they
were just bleeding money.
And as I said earlier, I do respect Eva for having these budget issues and making something that is worth talking about. Despite that, they should be commended. But I am also saying that those budget issues do affect my enjoyment of the show and the story. Because you can tell that they change tones they threw out the script halfway through, that they changed what they were going to do, because it looked like with those 7 to 13 that they were doing this other thing, and that maybe Shinji was going on more of a coming-of-age story sort of arc.
It does.
And then they go very much the opposite of that, later on.
But I think there's some interesting things, because I still think that, I think they handled the transition well.
Yeah, because part of my issue, this is a thing from End of Eva, but in End of Eva, at one point he's talking to, I think it's either Masato or Asuka in his head when he's in Human Instrumentality, and he says I'm a coward, I'm dishonest, talking about himself, and he's saying the exact same dialogue he said back at episode 3 or 4 when he was talking. I think that was when he was talking to Toji or Kensuke when he was running away, and they were dragging the guys were dragging him. He's like, I'm a coward, I'm dishonest, I'm a bad person, basically showing that from, let's say that was episode 3 or 4, we went through 26 episodes, or that's 21 episodes, 20 episodes of a TV show where Shinji was doing things and going through development, supposedly, and yet by the time of End of Eva, he's saying the exact same things that he was back then, so he's not changed at all.
Alex, you need to calm down. You're scaring the kids here.
Well, actually, but I think that's because the whole show, I think, is supposed to be or at least by the second half, but I do think that there are parts of even the first half that are about this metaphor for depression.
Right. And the first 6 episodes are.
And Shinji's character development, I think, is supposed to mirror how depression works in people.
So
him relapsing into depression as the plot progresses and as bad things happen, as more and more bad things pile onto him, is supposed to be a very realistic way of like showing his character relapsing back, dealing with this mental illness, relapsing back because he can't escape it. Like every time he tries, he takes a few steps and he's good. Because some weeks you have good weeks, some weeks you have bad weeks, and he relapses, especially by the end. Like I said, when his father forces him to murder his friend.
Right.
Ties the beginning to the end, definitely.
But then after that, it's after the Toji episode where he decides, no, I am going to pilot Ava, and he fights the angel.
But it doesn't mean that his depression's gone. It just means that he's just
No,
willing
but
to fight for a thing.
Well, right, but it shows some amount of like, okay,
But,
I
like-
shouldn't run away. I should fight.
Yeah, but did you see how he fought in that episode?
Well, he got his ass kicked, and then
he
the Ava
ate
went,
it.
Well, the Ava went berserk. He wasn't doing that.
Yeah, but how much is the Ava as a reflection of how he feels?
I think the point is that Unit 1 is something else. Like something else
Yes.
takes over then because it's Yui's in there, and the Avas are kind of monsters.
They are kind of monsters, but like, that's him like not being able to control himself. A metaphor for him not being able to control himself.
I guess, but it's more like he's sitting there in the cockpit watching this horror happen around him, kind of like what
Yeah.
happened with the dummy plug system.
Yeah, which is like,
It's not him controlling it, is
It's
my
not him
point.
controlling
He's
it.
watching it, but it's
he
not
can't-
him doing
well,
it.
It's kind of like that ties back to the metaphor of depression. He's just watching it. He's not anything he could. He feels powerless. He feels like he can't do anything to the world he's destroying around him. He can't stop himself.
Well, he can't stop himself, but that's less got anything to do with depression more than his robot's just going
Well,
crazy.
see,
and
but
he's
it's a
unconscious.
metaphor, Alex.
It's
You're not getting
metaphor.
the metaphor.
All right, fine.
Okay, but you guys are missing the entirely important question:
Ah.
who is best girl?
Oh, Oscar.
Oscar.
Uh,
Oh wait, are we really doing
no,
this?
Masato. Masato
Yeah,
is best
Masato
girl.
was probably the best girl.
Actually,
Come on,
Masato,
you're
yeah.
the tiebreaker. Oh, never mind. Never mind. You switched sides on me.
Yeah, dude,
Right.
come to the winning
Who's
side.
best girl, Chase? Come on.
Karu.
You're right.
Okay,
Hey.
Car. Actually, that's
Actually, no,
right.
no,
That's
no,
right.
actually,
That's
Car-
fair assessment.
adorable, yeah.
Fair assessment, yeah. All right, guys, Kara's agreed.
All right.
Best female.
So basically, getting back to my thoughts, I think Ava should be watched by people if they are interested in anime history at all, because Ava is a anime that is very historically significant, that changed a lot of things, and I do commend it for doing a dark psychological story at a time where nobody had done something that dark, that psychological before, kind of subverting what you'd expect from the mecha genre. All those things are interesting. There are a lot of good things about Ava. I do love the fight scenes. I love it, like when the Ava goes berserk. I like what they do with Toji. I like some of the elements of the depression and the stuff where they go into the mines. I did like those kind of episode of the week stuff, the action stuff. I liked the stuff with Sele, the mysteries of the show. Kaji kind of going through, discovering the secrets of what was going on. I liked all that. The problem then being that the end of the TV show doesn't answer any of those questions, leaves me feeling unfulfilled.
Yeah. Don't want
And
lost. That's my
and
advice to you.
and a lot of those monologues and things just come off as kind of bad writing to me, and just kind of going in circles and repeating these things that we've seen before. It's like, okay, I get it. We're depressed. Can we move on? Can we cover something new? Maybe? No?
It's
Okay.
Okay, that's a really interesting way to look at it as like a film student.
Yeah, because that's part of the way I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it as a narrative, as a TV show.
I'm looking at
as
the narrative too.
Well, right. But if we view the narrative as the plot, what's going on with Sele
yes.
and human instrumentality, the plot isn't resolved at all at the
But
end.
if we look at it as a character-driven story, the characters find the resolution in the end.
Well, I mean,
well,
you
at
could
least
argue
Shinji does.
you could argue that Shinji does, even though I have problems with how Shinji is developed. But even if we say that, the other characters don't. That's what Austin said. Asuka, Misato, Rei don't get any fulfillment
And
to their
I
arcs.
do agree with that, and I feel like they could have had at least a scene or two of them
Yeah,
also
fleshing them out more would be nice.
realizing that they need to come over,
Or
get
at
over
least
their depression.
getting there, because they get to they get to the core and then they just stop.
I do agree that is I will concede that is a legitimate criticism of the ending, and I feel like they could have added at least one more scene of maybe at the end right before Shinji has his big
Well, now
moment,
they're
or-
starting to get there,
or they just some kind of visual metaphor, maybe there's a light behind them and then it cuts to the next one.
maybe
Something it didn't have to be anything big. It had to be something. It could be something subtle.
Hey, still get to
yeah.
encourage Shinji. That's nice, right? We see him again.
right.
So overall, like I said, Ava is good. And it's a good show that should be watched if you have an interest in especially if you have an interest in psychological anime, or if you or if you want to see a piece of anime history, because it is very inspirational. Is it one of the greatest anime of all time? Is it a masterpiece? I would answer that with a resounding no, because I think it has way too many flaws to be considered a masterpiece. But it is a very interesting product, and it is interesting to talk about, certainly.
I don't,
a
masterpiece. I don't know if I...
Yeah.
I mean, it's very far from a masterpiece.
I mean,
But
it's
it's
not
Dragon Ball Z.
perfect.
That's the point.
But so you would say it's not a masterpiece, but you say it's one of the
not
greatest
Lucky
anime of
Star.
all time?
You're right.
It's one of the most important anime of all time.
I would agree with that. It is
Oh, yeah.
one of the most
It's
important.
definitely that. That is
revolutionized a lot of
indisputable.
But yeah, nobody can really deny that. It had a huge influence, know.
Influence.
It's more of is the story actually, up to snuff compared to the other amazing anime out there, And I would argue no.
See,
But-
I would say yes, but I wouldn't say it's a masterpiece. I would say that it's great, though.
Yeah. All right. So
Epic.
there we go. We've wrapped up our discussion at End of Eva. I know there was some back and forth, some hostile feelings, but that's okay.
But we
Yeah,
ended
really
up
just
having a
makes
good
sense.
discussion. So
Yeah!
It was.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Yay.
Well, yeah, things
How many
go-
times are we going to make that joke in this episode?
God, so many
we've
times.
only done it 3 times.
We really
could have done it like
all.
10.
What is this joke from?
You don't get it?
I've been zoning out most of the segment.
At the very end, when Shinji says, I want to continue living, they all clap. Congratulations.
Oh, that's it, man.
Congratulations.
Sorry. I thought you said something else. I was like, what?
Now Kenny knows the joke.
It's
Got
from a
it.
Doug episode.
There we
Oh,
go.
Doug. All right. So we have one more podcast that we're going to be doing before the end of the school year because we're getting close to that. Thanksgiving break's coming up. Yep. And based on my conversation with Matt the other day, he and I have sort of made this deal where I'm going to watch through the Tatami Galaxy if he watches through Ping Pong, both animes directed by a guy named Masaki Yuasa, who's a very kind of auteur anime director. He's made some great shows. I really enjoyed Ping Pong. Didn't really think I would like it, but actually it gets really good by the end. Heard Tatami Galaxy is very good. When we come back after break, we're either going to do both those shows or maybe just one. They're both 11 episodes long, so they're not very long series, but it might be too much to ask for 2 shows. I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I like the guy.
What, Matt or Yuasa?
You also.
Okay.
You don't like math?
I'm not an otaku
not so
freak, so I have no
I,
opinion.
I like Matt too.
Just kidding. I
All
love
right.
it.
Just to
kidding, I
establish
love you
this,
guys.
Jason does not, in fact, hate Matt.
2 shows? That's like 20 episodes. You're making me watch 20 episodes.
But this
of
would
things.
be after Thanksgiving break.
I know,
so
but
That's
like,
asking a lot, man.
okay,
I
fine.
have, like-
We'll just do one then.
okay.
So quick summary: Ping Pong is about like these
Is
guys.
it about ping pong?
It's about guys playing ping pong, but
What
it's
if it What's the other one about?
I
but
thought
it's
about pumping.
but I gotta establish this. It's a sports anime, but it's not really about the ping pong. It's about the characters.
So it's not Prince of
Oh,
Tennis?
I like those things.
No, it is not
Prince
of
of
Tennis.
Ping Pong.
It has a very off-model art style. Like the characters are drawn kind of ugly on purpose.
Okay.
But the animation, like during the ping pong matches, is actually like really good.
Cool.
So it's a very good character story. The
Oh,
other
I
one
like
is
character
called the
stories.
Tatami
It's
Galaxy. It's about a dude who like goes to college, spends the 2 years of his life trying to like have the rose-colored life, but keeps messing it up, going after this girl, and always has like the chance to kind of confess his feelings to her, but keeps failing. And basically gets sent back in time to the beginning of his college days, chooses a different club, and the same situation repeats itself. So it's kind of like he keeps repeating college over and over, doing these different clubs, and eventually, trying to find his way out of it. So with very fast-paced talking, kind of wacky-looking visual design. So of those two, which is more interesting,
this like
Tommy
watching
or
Alex?
Ping Pong? That's Ping Pong.
Okay,
Yes.
I looked just. to
I
make
like
sure
the
you were
second
lying.
one.
You like the sound of Tommy?
I do. Actually, that sounds fun.
Yeah. I will say also, for the longest time I didn't watch Ping Pong because I hated the visuals, but I kept hearing from other fans that it was amazing. So eventually I caved in, watched it, took a few episodes, but it eventually did really get really good. It's
Yeah,
on
I mean, sure.
it's on that top 75 list. I think it's like in the 30s.
I was about to say, I'm like, Alex, it being on the top. Is Ava on the top 75
It
list?
is, actually.
75.
It's lower than that. But yes.
It's number 78.
Speaking
I
of,
think it was 60 something, but I'd have to look.
I like that. See, this is what I see what we have to deal with our
this is-
illustrious
I mean,
host.
at least he is the host. It makes sense. If he was
It
not the
does.
host, that'd be embarrassing for the rest of
What
us.
are we gonna do without you? Who's gonna inherit this?
Not have a 75.
I don't know.
list.
Well, if you inherit it, Andrew,
Oh
then
my
you
God, I
must
cannot
watch
do
75.
75.
anime.
Each I have this. The way whoever earns this is the person who makes 100 anime
Well,
lists.
to be fair, a lot of those have come less from the fact that I did the podcast and more from the fact that I got into the habit of watching seasonal anime, which is like 20 shows a season usually.
The plot twist will be that I will take over.
But are you a senior this year? Or are you junior?
Junior.
Okay. So
Cool.
you could.
Then you're
theoretically.
you
Just
could
throw it
take
for a loop,
over.
take over.
I don't have to do it.
I don't watch that much anime.
Stand your pain.
I only have like a top 5 list because I've seen 5 animes.
Neither do I,
I
'cause
mean,
I
I could
watch-
probably make a top 10 list if I
Dude,
tried.
we're too busy
but-
watching
Listen,
Firefly.
you could.
We're too busy watching Firefly. How do we have time?
Oh
for
my god, Firefly! all the
Just
time.
watching Firefly
Actually,
on
that
rewatch.
reminds me.
rewatch. One
Speaking of
season.
Firefly,
Oh,
my
boy.
my decision over winter break is I'm gonna finally watch Cowboy Bebop.
All right. See that
about
actually
You heard
that's
it here,
yes.
folks.
that's going on. Funimation is putting it online now, although it's
Oh.
only by their Elite subscription thing, so you have to pay for it.
Well, I'm just gonna have to find it somewhere.
But maybe they'll put it on Hulu if we're lucky. I don't know.
I have Hulu.
Does it? Is it on Netflix? Maybe.
I don't
No.
think so.
No.
It hasn't.
Actually-
It's
No.
been through different licensors over the years.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. You're right. Now I think.
But now Funimation has it now, and they're like I said, they're releasing on their website, so maybe they are going to put on more online streaming sites. I certainly hope so.
That'd be cool.
And I would like to do Bebop maybe next semester.
Bebop.
Well, I will have watched.
Yeah,
it
we
by
do need
then,
official
so.
Bebop. We do.
'Cause
Need
I
We
do.
do.
I've always wanted to.
Bebop's my
All
number
right.
2.
It is indeed. Okay,
Where's
so
DBZ?
Shut up.
DBZ's
The
number
list
3
changes.
apparently. So I want to thank all of you out there for listening to this Ava podcast. I know it went a little long here, but we got into some good conversation.
go
It was
long.
going to go long regardless.
I don't know what you're
It
talking
was.
about, Alex.
I mean, there's a lot to talk about with Ava. If anything could be said about it, it is that.
That's what she
And
said.
I want to thank you guys
Wow.
for being on this podcast today
Putting
with
up
me,
with us.
especially Chase and Austin. I know you guys are on lots
Wow,
of
he
episodes.
hates
I
us.
know.
Wow.
I appreciate
Especially the guy
you
who talked the
guys.
most, and the guy who
No,
was
you
here.
guys were amazing. But you guys have been here more often. These two
Yes.
have only been on a few episodes. You guys
See-
have been here forever.
They're legends.
I know
We're
I have
stuck.
been here forever.
We're stuck here forever.
You're never leaving.
I feel like I'm chained to the table.
So if you guys enjoyed this podcast, you can email us at techheads@avwproductions.com. You can follow us on Twitter at techheadsu. Like us on Facebook. Bleh.
Facebook.
This is what happens when I try to talk too fast.
Fly me into the moon book.
Subscribe to us on Twitter. Give us good ratings, reviews. You know, subscribe to us on iTunes. We like hearing from you guys. So I guess when we come back next, we'll be doing the Tatami Galaxy. Should be a good podcast.
Are we gonna do the Ava rebuild soon? Because I want more Ava in my life suddenly.
I saw you watch
Yeah.
those.
Well, I wouldn't mind doing a marathon at my place because I do need to see 3.0.
I
And
need to watch
need
all
to
of them.
watch all 3 of them.
Yeah.
All
Exactly.
right. So maybe we'll do the rebuilds eventually. So until then, we will see you guys next time.
See you later, Space Cowboys.
This product is copyright AVW Productions 2014.